This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still have trouble sleeping at night. It's been 8 months since it happened, but every time I hear a noise in my place, my heart starts racing. I double-check my closet before going to bed. Every single night. I know it sounds paranoid, but after what I went through, I think it's justified. I'm 23, and I've always been the awkward guy. Social anxiety has been my unwanted companion since elementary school. Group projects were my personal hell. Birthday parties? Worse. I'd rather have dental work done than make small talk at parties. But despite all that, I managed to land a decent job in IT right out of college. The pay was good enough that I could afford my own place, a modest townhouse in a quiet suburban community. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a small yard, but it was mine. First time living completely alone. The dating scene had always been rough for me. My palms would sweat just thinking about approaching someone. That's why I downloaded Tinder. At least I could craft my messages without stammering or looking at my shoes. After a few weeks of swiping and some awkward conversations that went nowhere, I matched with Emily. Her profile seemed normal enough. 22, worked as a nurse, liked hiking and true crime podcasts. Her photos showed a pretty brunette with a wide smile. We started messaging and conversation came easily. She laughed at my jokes, seemed genuinely interested in my boring IT stories, and didn't mind my awkwardness when we finally met for coffee. That first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we were officially dating. For the first time, I felt like I had found someone who actually got me. She'd send cute texts throughout the day, bring me lunch at work sometimes, and always seemed excited to see me. When she first stayed over at my place, I couldn't believe my luck. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. They were there from the beginning, but I was too inexperienced and too desperate for connection to notice them. It started with little things. If I didn't respond to her texts within 15 minutes, she'd send more. "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering? Who are you with?" Then came the phone tracking app she insisted we both install for safety. She'd call me during my weekly gaming sessions with my friend Phil, asking when I'd be home. About 2 months in, I was at Phil's place for our usual Friday night gaming session when Emily showed up unannounced. She didn't knock, she just walked in. Phil's roommate had left the door unlocked. She stood there with this weird smile, saying she just wanted to surprise me. But her eyes, they were cold, scanning the room like she was looking for evidence of something. Phil tried to be nice, offered her a drink, but she just stared at me and said, "I've been calling you for an hour. Why didn't you pick up?" I showed her my phone, 3% battery, multiple missed calls. I apologized, explained that my phone was dying and I was caught up in the game. She nodded, but didn't really seem to accept it. Then she did something I still cringe thinking about. She sat down next to me, grabbed my controller, and threw it across the room, right in front of Phil and his roommate. "If I call you, you answer. Period." Everyone just froze. I felt my face burning with embarrassment. Phil tried to laugh it off, but the night was ruined. On the drive home, she acted like nothing had happened, chatted about her day, asked what I wanted for dinner. I was so confused and embarrassed that I just went along with it. That night at my place, she was all affection and apologies, saying she'd had a bad day and was worried when I didn't answer. I believed her because I wanted to, but things only escalated from there. She'd surprise me more often, showing up at my workplace during lunch. She'd go through my phone while I was in the shower. Once, she even accused me of cheating because I had a female colleague's number in my contacts, a colleague I'd mentioned to Emily multiple times. After the incident at Phil's, I started pulling away. I made excuses not to see her, said I was working late, needed alone time. She didn't take it well. More texts, more calls, more unannounced visits. The final straw came when she showed up at Phil's place again the following Friday, this time pounding on the door and screaming that she knew I was there. When Phil opened up, she pushed past him, found me, and started checking my phone, accusing me of texting other girls. I knew then I had to end it, but I was terrified of doing it face to face. After she finally left Phil's that night, only after I promised to come to her place later, which I had no intention of doing, I went home and sent her a text breaking things off. Cowardly, I know, but I was genuinely scared of her reaction. The response was immediate. My phone exploded with calls and texts. "You can't do this to me. We're meant to be together. You'll regret this." I turned my phone off, but 20 minutes later, there was pounding on my front door. Emily screaming my name, begging me to talk to her. This went on for almost an hour until one of my neighbors threatened to call the police. After that, silence. For a week, things were quiet. Too quiet. I changed the locks on my doors just to be safe. I blocked her number, her social media. I thought maybe it was over, that she'd moved on. Then came that night. I had been at Phil's again, trying to get back to some kind of normal. Got home around 11:30, feeling better than I had in weeks. As I was getting ready for bed, I heard something, a small thump from somewhere in the house. Living alone, you get to know the normal creaks and groans of your place. This wasn't one of them. I froze, listening. Nothing. Maybe it was just the neighbor's cat jumping on my porch again. But then I heard another noise, like something sliding across a surface. It was coming from upstairs. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering that I thought someone had broken into my house, possibly my ex-girlfriend who had been stalking me. The dispatcher told me to leave if I could do so safely. I crept toward the front door, but then heard definite footsteps upstairs. I panicked and told the dispatcher I was going to hide in my downstairs bathroom until police arrived. Those 5 minutes waiting were the longest of my life. When the police finally knocked, I nearly collapsed with relief. They searched the entire house, upstairs, downstairs, closets, under beds, the attic access. Nothing. One officer suggested it might have been raccoons on the roof or pipes settling. They were kind about it, not making me feel crazy for calling, especially after I explained the situation with Emily. After they left, I double-checked all the windows and doors myself. Everything was secure. I told myself I was just jumpy after everything with Emily. It was nearly 2 a.m. by then, and exhaustion hit me hard. I collapsed into bed and fell into a restless sleep. The buzz of my phone woke me at 3:17. I remember the time exactly because I stared at it in disbelief when I saw who was messaging me. Emily. Somehow she was texting me from a new number I hadn't blocked. "I miss you so much. Please give me another chance. I know I messed up, but I love you. Just talk to me, please." Half asleep and irritated, I texted back, "Stop contacting me. It's over. If you don't leave me alone, I'm getting a restraining order." I hit send and put my phone down. That's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood turn to ice, a muffled sob, from inside my bedroom closet. Before I could move, before I could even process what was happening, the closet door burst open. Emily stood there, her face streaked with tears, her hair wild, and in her hand was a kitchen knife, my kitchen knife. "You don't get to leave me," she hissed. "If I can't have you, no one will." I don't remember getting out of bed. Pure adrenaline took over. I lunged for the bedroom door, hearing her footsteps right behind me. I made it through the doorway and slammed the door shut, holding the knob with all my strength. Immediately, I felt the impact as she slammed against it from the other side. "Open the door," she screamed. "We need to be together." I braced myself against the door, my bare feet sliding on the hardwood floor as she rammed against it again. Then came the worst sound, the sound of the knife stabbing through the door, inches from my head. She stabbed again and again, the knife piercing the hollow core door like it was paper. I knew I couldn't hold the door forever. My phone was still in the bedroom. I had no way to call for help. One of the knife thrusts came through so close to my hand that I felt the air displacement. "Emily," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emily, stop. Let's talk about this." The stabbing paused. "You want to talk now?" Her voice was unrecognizable, wavering between rage and hope. "Yes," I said. I was confused. I still love you." The words tasted like poison, but they were my only chance. "You're lying," she said, but I could hear the uncertainty. "I'm not. I was scared of how strongly I feel about you. Please, put the knife down so we can talk properly." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard the clatter of the knife hitting the floor. "I put it down," she said. "Let me in so we can talk." I needed to keep her calm while figuring out a plan. "I will, but first I need you to kick the knife away, so there are no misunderstandings." I heard the scrape of the knife sliding across the floor. "It's by the window now," she said. "Please open the door. I need to see you." I took a deep breath and slowly opened the door. Emily stood there, tears still streaming down her face, but now she was smiling. That smile will haunt me forever. So hopeful, so detached from the reality of what she'd just done. The knife was indeed by the window, several feet away. My phone was still on the nightstand. I kept my eyes on her as I moved into the room, trying to position myself between her and the knife. "I knew you still loved me," she said, stepping toward me with outstretched arms. I lunged past her, grabbing my phone. She screamed in rage, realizing my deception, and dove for the knife. I was faster. I tackled her to the ground, using my weight to pin her down. She fought like a wild animal, scratching, biting, screaming obscenities. I managed to hit the emergency call button on my phone, which was still unlocked. 911, what's your emergency?" "Help," I shouted. "She's trying to kill me. Same address as before. Hurry." Emily's nails raked across my face, drawing blood. I nearly lost my grip on her, but pure survival instinct kept me holding on. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes before I heard sirens, then the sound of my front door being kicked in. "Police, where are you?" "Upstairs. Bedroom," I shouted. 2 officers burst in, weapons drawn. They quickly took control, pulling Emily off me and restraining her. She was still screaming that I loved her, that we belonged together, that they couldn't keep us apart. As they led her away, one of the officers asked how she'd gotten in. That's when we discovered the sliding glass door to my back patio had been jimmied open, so carefully that it still looked locked at first glance. She'd been in my house during the first police search, hidden somewhere they hadn't checked thoroughly enough, waiting. The next few months were a blur of police statements, court appearances, and therapy sessions. Emily was charged with breaking and entering, stalking, and attempted murder. She's in prison now. I've moved since then. New town, new job, new locks that I check obsessively. I sleep with a baseball bat beside my bed. I still haven't been on another date. The worst part isn't the fear or the nightmares. It's knowing that someone I thought I loved, someone I let into my life, my home, my bed, was capable of such violence, and I never saw it coming until it was almost too late. How can I ever trust my judgment again? Sometimes I wonder if she's writing me letters from prison that get intercepted. If she's still planning what she'll do when she gets out. If she still thinks we're meant to be together. And every night, before I go to sleep, I check my closet, just to be sure. Story 2. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened to us last summer. It's been almost a year, but I keep replaying everything in my mind, hoping something will click and I'll understand what we encountered that night. It was July 2021, during that heat wave that hit the Pacific Northwest. My buddy Henry and I had been doing these tame camping trips for years. You know, the ones with bathrooms and picnic tables where families set up 10 feet away from you. We were both sick of it. We wanted to experience what we called real camping. No facilities, no people, just us and nature. We'd been talking about it for months. I spent weeks researching spots online, going through hiking forums and outdoor blogs. Finally found this place about 3 hours from our city. No official campsite, just a clearing on a hill that somebody mentioned had an amazing view of the valley. You had to hike about 4 hours from the nearest access point to get there. It sounded perfect. We packed everything we thought we'd need: tent, sleeping bags, enough food and water for 2 days, first aid kit, the works. Looking back, we were probably overconfident. We'd never gone this remote before, but we thought, how hard could it be? The drive out was normal enough. We left early, around 6 in the morning, blasting music and stopping at this sketchy gas station for snacks. The last hour of driving, though, that's when things started feeling different. The road got increasingly worse, like nobody had maintained it for years. Parts were completely washed out, and at one point we had to drive around this massive fallen tree. Henry kept joking that his Subaru wasn't built for this, but I could tell he was getting nervous. We finally reached this tiny clearing that passed for a parking area. There were no other cars. The quiet hit me immediately, not the peaceful kind, but the oppressive silence that makes your ears ring. It was already past 11, and we still had the 4-hour hike ahead of us. The trail was barely visible in some parts. We had to check the map on my phone constantly, which was stressful because the signal kept dropping in and out. The forest was dense, old-growth stuff with trees so tall they blocked most of the sunlight. The whole time I had this weird feeling like the woods were swallowing us up. We reached the clearing around 3 in the afternoon. Henry was right behind me as we climbed the last stretch, and I remember him saying, "Holy shit, this view better be worth it." And it was. You could see for miles, just endless green forest stretching out below us. The clearing itself was maybe 40 feet across, flat enough for our tent, with a small fire pit someone had made with stones. Henry started setting up the tent while I gathered firewood. That's when I noticed them. I was stacking branches when movement caught my eye maybe 100 yards down the hill. Through gaps in the trees, I could see what looked like 4 or 5 people walking. They weren't on any trail I could see, just moving through the dense forest. I called out to Henry, "Hey, there's people down there." He dropped what he was doing and came over, but by then, whoever it was had disappeared behind thicker foliage. Henry shrugged it off. Probably just other hikers, but something felt off. Who would be hiking off-trail in such dense woods? And they moved so coordinated. like they were searching for something. We finished setting up camp, made some freeze-dried pasta on the portable stove, and watched the sunset. It was gorgeous, all these purples and oranges stretching across the sky. As darkness fell, we built a campfire and sat talking about work, relationships, all the usual stuff. Henry was telling me about this girl he'd started seeing when we heard them. Voices, multiple people talking, coming from the direction I'd seen the figures earlier. We both stopped mid-conversation. The voices weren't loud, but in the stillness of the forest, we could clearly tell there were at least 3 or 4 different people speaking. The weirdest part? We couldn't understand what they were saying. It wasn't English, and I couldn't place the language at all. It had this unusual rhythm to it. Henry whispered, "What are they saying?" I shook my head. We sat perfectly still, straining to hear. Then, without any indication they were moving away, the voices just stopped. Complete silence fell over everything. My skin was crawling. I looked at Henry and could tell he was feeling it too. That's when we heard footsteps, just one set, coming up toward our clearing. Twigs snapping, leaves crunching, getting closer. A man walked into the light of our campfire. He was tall, maybe mid-50s, with this long white hair tied back in a ponytail. What stuck out most was his bright pink football jersey. Such a bizarre thing to wear hiking. It was dirty, like he'd been in the woods for days. His face was deeply tanned and weathered, but his smile, God, his smile was too wide, too many teeth, and it didn't reach his eyes at all. "Evening, fellas," he said. His voice was friendly enough, but something about his tone felt rehearsed. "Beautiful night for camping." Henry, always the social one, replied, "Yeah, perfect weather. You camping nearby?" The man shook his head. "Just hiking. Actually, I was hoping you could point me to the main trail. I think I got turned around a bit." I couldn't help myself. "Are you with those others we heard down there?" His smile faltered for just a second, so quick I almost missed it. Then it was back, wider than before. "Others? No, I'm hiking alone. Haven't seen anyone else out here all day." He was lying. I knew it immediately. The voices had stopped just minutes before he appeared, and he came from exactly that direction. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We thought we heard people talking down that way." His eyes locked onto mine, and I swear it felt like being stared at by something that wasn't quite right. "Nope, just me out here." "So about that trail?" Henry pointed vaguely back the way we'd come. "It's about a quarter mile that way. You can't miss it." The man nodded, still smiling that horrible smile. "Much appreciated. You boys have a good night now. Stay safe." He emphasized those last 2 words in a way that made my stomach turn. Then he walked off into the darkness in the direction Henry had pointed. As soon as he was out of earshot, Henry grabbed my arm. "What the fuck was that about?" "I don't know, man," I whispered. But he was lying about being alone. You heard those voices. "And why's he hiking at night? In a pink jersey," Henry added. "And did you see his boots? They were like heavy-duty work boots, not hiking boots." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing. Then Henry said what I was thinking. "I don't feel good about this, Raph. I think we should pack up and go." I agreed immediately. Something was very wrong here. We started grabbing our stuff, working as quietly as possible. Henry took down the tent while I put out the fire. That's when I heard it, leaves crunching behind me. I spun around and shined my flashlight toward the sound. There he was, the same man, standing just 10-15 meters from our camp, half hidden behind a tree. He wasn't moving, just watching us. When my light hit his face, he didn't react, didn't blink or shield his eyes. He just broke into that same wide, horrible smile. "Henry," I hissed, not taking my eyes off the man. "Henry, he's back." Henry turned and saw him. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Then louder, "Hey man, what are you doing? You need something." The man didn't respond. He just kept smiling. That's when we heard more rustling in the woods around us, from multiple directions, more footsteps, more movement. The man finally spoke. "You boys should have stayed by your fire." I don't remember deciding to run. 1 second we were frozen in fear. The next we were sprinting down the trail, our half-packed gear forgotten. I had my small backpack with my phone and wallet. Henry had nothing but his car keys. We didn't even have time to grab our flashlights. All we had was the weak light from my phone. The footsteps behind us multiplied. It sounded like several people crashing through the undergrowth after us. They were fast, gaining on us. I remember Henry yelling, "Don't look back, just run." We were stumbling more than running, barely able to see the trail. My lungs were burning, branches whipping my face. The sounds behind us got closer. Then they started to fade. After about 15 minutes of all-out sprinting, we couldn't hear them anymore. We didn't stop, though. We kept moving as fast as we could, checking behind us constantly. The 4-hour hike back took us maybe 2.5 hours of pure adrenaline-fueled terror. When we finally saw Henry's car, I almost cried with relief. We jumped in and peeled out of there, not even bothering to catch our breath. Henry was shaking so badly he could barely drive. We didn't speak until we hit the main highway, and even then all he said was, "What the fuck was that? What the actual fuck was that?" I've gone over it 1,000,000 times in my head. Who were those people? What did they want? Were they just trying to scare us? Or was it something worse? The way they moved through that dense forest, like it was nothing. The language we couldn't identify. That man's unnatural smile. We left behind probably $1,000 worth of camping gear, but neither of us has ever suggested going back for it. Henry and I don't talk about that night much, but I know he thinks about it too. Sometimes he'll text me at 3 in the morning with some new theory, or just to check if I'm awake. I haven't been camping since, not even in those safe campgrounds we used to laugh at. Some nights I still wake up hearing those voices in the forest, speaking words I couldn't understand. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see that man's too wide smile coming closer in the darkness, and I wake up gasping for air. What keeps me up most nights isn't just what happened, it's what didn't happen. What would have occurred if we'd stayed? What were they planning to do? I don't know if they were some weird cult, or people cooking meth in the woods, or something else entirely. But whenever I think about that man saying, "You boys should have stayed by your fire," I feel sick to my stomach. I've tried researching the area since then, looking for similar stories or reports of missing hikers. Haven't found anything conclusive. It's like whatever happened that night existed just for us. All I know is something was very wrong in those woods, and sometimes I still catch myself checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that man in the pink jersey, smiling his terrible smile. Story 3. I still get anxious when I see garage sale signs in my neighborhood. It's been over 5 years now, but some wounds don't heal completely. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I hear footsteps in my house. My therapist says it's normal after what happened, but knowing something is normal doesn't make it easier to live with. It was the second weekend of March, 2018. The Texas spring was just beginning to warm up, and I'd spent weeks clearing out my garage and spare bedroom. My divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, and I needed to purge all the things that reminded me of my failed marriage. Plus, I could use the extra cash for the bathroom renovation I'd been planning. I set up everything in my driveway and garage around 6:30 that morning. Tables with clothes, shelves with old kitchen gadgets, boxes of books, and some furniture pieces my ex and I had collected during our 12 years together. I put price stickers on everything the night before, made a pot of coffee, and settled into a lawn chair near the garage entrance with my phone and a crossword puzzle book. The sale started at 7, and by 9, I'd had a steady stream of early birds and neighborhood regulars. Nothing unusual, just your typical Saturday garage sale in suburban Fort Worth. Around 11, when things started to slow down, I noticed him for the first time. He wasn't immediately alarming. Average height, average build, maybe mid-40s. He wore jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a Rangers baseball cap. Nothing about him stood out, which I later realized was precisely what made him so dangerous. He could blend into any crowd. At first, he just browsed like everyone else, picking up items and putting them down. But after about 20 minutes, I realized he was still there, moving methodically through my belongings. He would pick something up, look at it, then look at my house. Pick something else up, look at it, then look at my house again. It was subtle, but once I noticed the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. He approached me with a coffee table book about Texas architecture. "This is nice," he said. "You have good taste." I thanked him and told him the price. He nodded and kept holding the book, then asked if I lived alone. The question made my stomach tighten, but I quickly responded that my boyfriend was inside, just taking a shower. A lie, of course, but it came, naturally. He nodded again and put the book down. "Nice house," he said, gesturing toward my modest 2-bedroom ranch. "How long have you lived here?" I kept my answer vague, suddenly uncomfortable with his questions. He seemed to notice my hesitation and switched to asking about a dresser I had for sale. Where was it from? How old was it? Were there matching pieces? The questions seemed innocent enough on the surface, but something about his demeanor felt off. He wasn't asking like someone interested in buying furniture. He was asking like someone taking inventory. After a few more minutes, he thanked me and left without buying anything. I watched him walk down the street instead of getting into a car. No shopping bag, no wallet visible, just a man walking away, memorizing my address. The sale continued until around 4 in the afternoon. My neighbor Elaine came by near the end and helped me move the unsold furniture back into the garage. I told her about the strange man, and she said she'd keep an eye out, but we both dismissed it as probably nothing. Just one of those odd interactions you sometimes have with strangers. By 5:30, I was exhausted. I'd made about $300 and gotten rid of most of what I wanted to sell. I decided to leave the few remaining boxes in the garage for a potential second sale the following weekend. I closed the garage door, went inside, took a long shower, and ordered pizza for dinner. I was halfway through an episode of some cooking competition show when I heard what sounded like my side gate opening. It has a distinctive squeak, one of those things you always mean to fix but never get around to. I muted the TV and listened. Maybe it was just the wind. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps on my back patio. My heart started racing immediately. I lived in a safe neighborhood, the kind where people still left their doors unlocked sometimes, though I never did. Nothing like this had ever happened before. I grabbed my phone and moved away from the windows, trying to decide if I should call 911 yet, or if I was overreacting. Before I could decide, there was a knock at my back door. Not a normal knock, more like someone testing to see if the door was secure. I froze, hoping whoever it was would think no one was home and leave. Instead, I heard the doorknob turning. Thank God I'd locked it. "I know you're in there," called a voice. A voice I recognized from earlier that day. "I just want to talk about that dresser." It was him, the man from the garage sale. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers, but before I could hit call, there was a loud crash. He'd broken the glass pane next to the doorknob. I dropped my phone and ran for my bedroom, hearing him unlock the door from the inside. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it, then pushed my nightstand against it. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and completed the call to 911, whispering my address and situation to the dispatcher, who told me to stay on the line and hide. "Officers were on their way," she said. 7 minutes out. 7 minutes feels like 7 hours when someone is breaking into your home. I could hear him moving through my house, opening drawers in the kitchen, rummaging through the living room. He wasn't even trying to be quiet. Then his footsteps approached my bedroom door. "I know this is where you're hiding," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I just want your cash from the garage sale and whatever jewelry you have. Then I'll leave. No one needs to get hurt." The doorknob rattled. I pressed myself against the wall beside my closet, still clutching my phone, the dispatcher silent, but listening. "The police are on their way," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. "We both know they won't get here in time. Now open the door before I have to break it down." He started kicking the door. The wood cracked on the third kick, and my flimsy nightstand barrier moved a few inches. On the fifth kick, the door frame splintered and the nightstand toppled over. And there he was, the same unremarkable man from my garage sale, except now he had a gun pointed at me. "Where's your boyfriend?" he asked with a smirk, clearly knowing I'd lied earlier. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The dispatcher was saying something in my ear, but all I could focus on was the gun and his eyes, cold, calculating eyes that had been watching me, studying my home's layout, planning this moment all day. "Your cash," he said again, "and your jewelry, now." I pointed shakily to my dresser where I'd put the garage sale money in the top drawer. He kept the gun aimed at me while he pulled open drawers, stuffing cash and my few pieces of decent jewelry into his pockets. "This is pathetic," he spat. $300 and some cheap silver? You must have something else valuable." "That's all I have," I whispered. "Please just take it and go." He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway, the gun pressed against my ribs. "Show me where the good stuff is. Safe? Lockbox? Where?" I told him again I didn't have anything else of value. The divorce had cleaned me out. He tightened his grip, digging the gun barrel deeper into my side. That's when we both heard the sirens. His demeanor changed instantly. Panic flickered across his face. He shoved me hard against the wall and ran toward the back door. I crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath, as I heard him crash through my backyard and over the fence. The police arrived seconds later, finding my back door open and me still huddled in the hallway. They searched the house and yard but found no sign of him. He'd vanished as quickly and efficiently as he'd appeared. The next few hours were a blur of police reports, evidence collection, and neighbors gathering outside to see what had happened. The officers told me I was lucky, that in similar incidents across town, the perpetrator had become violent when confronted. They believed he was responsible for at least 3 other robberies following garage sales in nearby neighborhoods. They called him the garage sale stalker. He'd use the sales to scout potential targets, watching to see who lived alone, who had nice things, who seemed vulnerable. Then he'd return later, armed and dangerous. I learned that a woman 2 neighborhoods over had been pistol whipped the previous weekend when she tried to fight back. Another had been tied to a chair while he ransacked her home. We were all connected now by this man who had turned something as innocent as a garage sale into a hunting ground. I couldn't sleep in my house that night, or for many nights after. I stayed with Elaine while my back door was repaired and a security system installed. I gave the police a detailed description, but it could have matched thousands of men in Fort Worth. That was his strength. He was forgettably average. For months, I jumped at every sound. I installed motion sensor lights, camera doorbells, new locks, window alarms. My home became a fortress, but I still didn't feel safe. It wasn't until September that they caught him, after a neighborhood watch group spotted him casing another garage sale and blocked his car until police arrived. His name was Mark Eldridge. The news said he had a record of burglaries stretching back decades. They found items from multiple robberies in his car and motel room, including my grandmother's silver bracelet. Even after his arrest and conviction, something fundamental had changed for me. The safety I once took for granted was gone. The trust I had in strangers was shattered. I haven't hosted another garage sale since that day, and I don't think I ever will. What haunts me most isn't the material things he took. It's knowing how easily he identified me as a target, how methodically he planned his attack, and how completely he stole my sense of security. I still see him sometimes, not the actual man, but his type, browsing at stores, walking through my neighborhood, watching and waiting for opportunity. The physical wounds heal, the broken door gets fixed, but the fear that someone is studying you, learning your patterns, and planning to violate your sanctuary, that's a scar that never completely fades. Story 4. I still don't know how to explain what happened to me 3 weeks ago. I'm a delivery driver in Manaus, and I've seen some weird stuff in this job, but nothing like this. I work for one of those food delivery apps. You know, the ones where people order food and we bring it to them. I've been doing this for about 2 years now, mostly in the evenings since the tips are better. That night started like any other. It was a Thursday, and I'd been delivering since around 5 in the afternoon. Business was steady, but not crazy busy. Around 9:20, I got an order from a small restaurant near downtown. Just some basic food, nothing special. The app showed the delivery location was pretty far out, but the tip was good, so I accepted it. I picked up the food and checked the address on my phone. It was about 20 minutes away, which is longer than most of my deliveries. The location was along this single-lane road that cuts through the forest to connect to the next town. I've driven that road plenty of times during the day, but not often at night. The restaurant owner looked at me funny when I told him where I was going. "That far out? At this hour?" he asked. I just shrugged. A good tip is a good tip, right? In hindsight, I should have listened to the uneasy feeling in my stomach, so I got on my motorcycle and headed out. The city lights faded behind me as I took the road into the forest. Let me tell you, that stretch of the Amazon at night is something else. The darkness isn't just dark. It's like this living thing that swallows everything. My headlight barely cut through it, and the trees on both sides of the road made it feel like I was driving through a tunnel. The humidity was crazy that night. My shirt was sticking to my back, and even though I was moving, the air felt thick and still. Insects were making that constant buzzing noise they do here, and occasionally I'd hear something moving in the trees, probably monkeys or birds, but at night, your mind starts playing tricks on you. After about 15 minutes of driving, I started paying more attention to my GPS. According to the app, I was getting close. I slowed down, expecting to see a driveway or a house or something, but there was nothing, just more trees and darkness. Then my GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." I stopped my motorcycle in the middle of the road and looked around. There was absolutely nothing there. No house, no driveway, no lights, nothing. Just the narrow road cutting through the dense forest. I checked Google Maps to confirm, thinking maybe the delivery app's GPS was off. Nope. Google Maps showed the same thing. I was exactly at the pin. I even checked Apple Maps as a third opinion. I keep both map apps on my phone for situations like this. Same result. According to 3 different mapping systems, I was right where I was supposed to be. I turned off my motorcycle and listened. All I could hear were the insects and the occasional rustle of leaves. It was so dark that I couldn't see more than a few meters into the forest on either side of the road. The air felt even heavier now that I wasn't moving. I decided to call the customer. As I was pulling out my phone, something caught my eye. A faint light blinking from somewhere in the forest to my right. It was barely visible, just a brief flash that disappeared almost immediately. I thought maybe it was my imagination or a reflection, but then I saw it again. A small bluish light, like from a phone screen or a flashlight covered with something, blinking from deep within the trees. My phone rang 3 times before the customer answered. "Hello?" a man's voice said. It sounded strangely muffled, like he was covering his mouth or speaking through something. "Hi, this is Felipe from the delivery app. I'm at the location you provided, but there's no house here, just the forest road." "No, you're in the right place," he said quickly. "There's a small driveway there. It's just hard to spot. It goes into the woods a little bit." I looked around again. "I don't see any driveway, sir. There's nothing but trees here." "Trust me, it's there. You probably just can't see it in the dark. Why don't you get out and look? It's on the right side of the road." Something about his tone made me uncomfortable. It wasn't rude or threatening, just off somehow. Too eager. As I was considering what to do, I saw that faint light again, blinking from within the trees. It was definitely on the right side of the road, maybe 30 or 40 meters into the forest. "Is that you with a light in the forest?" I asked. There was a pause. "Yes, that's me. I'm at my house. Just follow the driveway in. It's right there." "Why don't you come out to the road? It would be easier," I suggested. "I can't right now," he said quickly. "I'm busy with something. Just find the driveway, get out of your car and look closer. It's right there, I promise." First of all, I was on a motorcycle, not in a car, which he should have known since the app shows what vehicle the driver is using. Second, why wouldn't he just come to the road if he could see me from where he was? My heart started beating faster. The whole situation felt wrong. "Sir, I think," I started to say, but the call suddenly ended. I sat there on my motorcycle trying to decide what to do. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was what might have been a very crude path, not a driveway, more like a narrow dirt line where the undergrowth was slightly trampled, leading into the forest on the right side of the road. It was so faint that I would never have spotted it if I wasn't specifically looking for it. The light blinked again from within the trees, seeming to beckon me forward. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, but I'd come all this way with this food, and I needed the money from this delivery. Still, I wasn't about to walk into the pitch-black forest to follow some barely there path to a mysterious blinking light. I decided on a compromise. I turned on my phone's flashlight and cautiously got off my motorcycle. The forest seemed to get quieter as I did, like everything was holding its breath. The humidity pressed against me like a wet blanket. I walked to the edge of the road where I thought I'd seen the path. Up close, it looked even less like a proper trail, just a slight depression in the undergrowth, as if someone had walked through there a few times, nothing more. The light blinked again, deeper in the forest. It seemed to be moving slightly, shifting position. That was it for me. I wasn't going in there. Instead, I put the food package on the ground at the start of the so-called path, took a picture of it as proof of delivery, and started backing toward my motorcycle. That's when I heard it, the sound of movement in the forest, not the normal rustling of leaves or animals. This was deliberate movement. Something, or someone, was coming toward me through the undergrowth. I didn't wait to see what it was. I jumped on my motorcycle, started it up, and got out of there as fast as I could. As I sped away, I glanced in my mirror and could have sworn I saw not one but several of those faint lights at the edge of the forest where the road had been. I drove like crazy all the way back to the city, not slowing down until I saw streetlights again. When I got home, I was still shaking. I reported the incident to the delivery app support, but they just said they'd look into it and reminded me that I should always complete deliveries as instructed. The next day, out of curiosity and still freaked out, I checked the delivery address on a map in daylight. According to official city records, there are no registered properties or buildings anywhere near that spot. It's just protected forest land. I've asked other drivers if they've had deliveries to that area, but no one has. I even drove back there one afternoon. I know, probably stupid, but I had to see, and there was absolutely no sign of any path or trail where I'd seen one that night. Just solid, dense forest. I don't know who ordered that food or what would have happened if I'd followed that path into the trees. Maybe it was just some guys playing a prank, or maybe someone living illegally in the forest. But sometimes I think about those multiple lights I saw as I drove away, and how the customer knew I was in a car when I was actually on a motorcycle, and I get cold all over again. I've stopped taking deliveries that go anywhere near that road now. The extra tips aren't worth it. Whatever was waiting for me in that forest that night, I'm glad I never found out. Story 5. I was just 6 years old when it happened, but even now, 20 years later, I remember every detail of that Easter Sunday like it was yesterday. My family was super religious, the kind that never missed a Sunday service at St. Matthew's Church in Willowbrook, our small town where everybody knew everybody, or at least that's what we thought. It was Easter Sunday, one of the biggest days of the year for us. Mom had dressed me in this uncomfortable blue suit with a clip-on tie that kept choking me. My sister wore this frilly yellow dress that she wouldn't stop twirling around in. Dad kept telling us to behave, that this was a special day, that Jesus had risen. I didn't fully understand what that meant back then, but I knew it was important. St. Matthew's was this old building with 2 levels, the main sanctuary upstairs where all the adults went, and the basement where us kids had Sunday school. Usually, services lasted about an hour, but Easter was different. The sermon went on forever, and I remember squirming in the pew, my mom giving me that look that meant, sit still or else. The church was packed. Folks who only showed up on Christmas and Easter filled every seat. It smelled like too many perfumes mixed together and those weird waxy candles. When the service finally ended, all the kids were sent downstairs for Sunday school, while the adults mingled and did whatever adults do after church. I remember walking down those creaky stairs to the basement, which had been decorated with pastel paper streamers and cutouts of crosses and empty tombs. Miss Sabrina, our teacher, who was probably in her 20s but seemed ancient to me then, greeted us at the door with a basket of chocolate eggs. The basement of St. Matthew's always felt a bit weird to me. The fluorescent lights flickered, and the drop ceiling had those water stains that looked like faces if you stared long enough. The hallway stretched down past several classrooms to a set of bathrooms at the end, and beyond that was an emergency exit door with one of those push bars and a sign that said, "Alarm will sound," though everyone knew the alarm hadn't worked in years. We were about halfway through the Easter lesson, something about rolling stones and angels, when I realized I needed to pee. Really bad. I raised my hand, and Miss Sabrina nodded, so I got up and headed down that long hallway to the bathroom. The boys' bathroom at St. Matthew's was nothing special. 2 stalls, 2 urinals, and sinks with those push faucets that only give you 3 seconds of water. I went into one of the stalls because I was shy about using urinals back then. While I was sitting there, I heard the bathroom door open and someone go into the stall next to mine. That's when I first heard it, this weird scraping sound coming from the next stall. It wasn't normal bathroom sounds. It was like something rough being dragged across the floor or wall. I finished up quickly, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. When I went to wash my hands, I caught movement in the mirror. The stall door behind me opened, and that's when I saw him, a man in an Easter bunny costume. But this wasn't like the Easter bunnies you see at the mall. This costume looked old and dirty. The fur that should have been white was this grayish color, and there were stains on it that I couldn't identify. The head was the worst part. One of the eyes was sewn back on all crooked, so it looked like the bunny was winking at me. The mouth was frozen in this big smile that didn't look happy at all. But here's the thing, I wasn't scared. Not yet. Because why would I be? It was Easter, and there was an Easter bunny. It made perfect sense to my 6-year-old brain. I even remember thinking how cool it was that we had our own Easter bunny at church. The bunny man tilted his head and said in this weird, muffled voice, "You're the lucky chosen child. I have a gift for you outside." He pointed one furry gloved hand toward the emergency exit door at the end of the hall. I felt special, chosen. I remember this warm feeling spreading through me because I'd been picked for something important. The other kids would be so jealous. "Come with me," he said, and I followed him without hesitation. He pushed open the emergency exit door, which should have been locked from the inside, and held it for me. We stepped out into the bright spring sunlight, a huge contrast to the dim church basement. The parking lot stretched out before us, half full with cars from the service. Beyond the lot was a line of trees and some dumpsters where the church kept their trash. The bunny man started walking across the parking lot, and I followed him, practically skipping. He was heading toward the far corner where some bushes partially hid a dark-colored car I hadn't noticed before. About halfway across the lot, he reached down and took my hand. His glove felt sweaty and wrong against my skin. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A second Easter bunny, standing by the car. I stopped walking. This didn't make sense. Even to my young mind, I knew there couldn't be 2 Easter bunnies. That's when the first thread of fear started to unravel inside me. The bunny holding my hand tugged harder, and I stumbled forward a few steps. The second bunny opened the car door, and as he did, I caught a glimpse of someone in the back seat. It looked like another kid, just sitting there, not moving. "Come on," the bunny holding my hand said, his voice suddenly less friendly. "Your special surprise is waiting." I started to pull back, but his grip tightened. The fur of his glove scratched against my wrist as he yanked me forward. And then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, Miss Sabrina's voice shouting my name. "Daniel, what are you doing out here?" I turned to see her standing at the emergency exit door, her eyes wide with confusion that quickly turned to horror. "Get away from him!" she screamed, running toward us. The bunny man dropped my hand like it had burned him. He said something I couldn't understand to the other bunny, and they both scrambled into the car. I stood frozen, watching as Miss Sabrina ran toward me, and the car's engine roared to life. As the car pulled away, I saw movement in the back window, a small face pressed against the glass, looking out at me. I've spent 20 years trying to convince myself I imagined that face, but I know what I saw. Miss Sabrina grabbed me and pulled me against her, shaking. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you? What happened?" I remember feeling confused more than scared at that point. "The Easter Bunny said I was chosen," I told her. "He had a surprise for me." Miss Sabrina's face went white. She picked me up. I was small for my age, and ran back into the church, shouting for help. What happened next is a blur of adults asking questions, my parents hugging me too tight, and police officers with serious faces writing in notepads. They asked me so many questions over and over. What did the Easter Bunny sound like? Did I see his face? What kind of car was it? I couldn't answer most of them. I was 6, and to me, it had been the Easter Bunny until it wasn't. They checked the church security cameras, but the ones covering the back exit had been unplugged earlier that day. The police searched the area, but found nothing except some tire tracks. They questioned everyone at the church, but nobody had seen any Easter bunnies besides me and Miss Sabrina. The most disturbing thing the police told my parents, which I overheard from my bedroom later that night, was that whoever did this had to have known the layout of the church. They knew which door would be unlocked, where the cameras were, and the schedule of our Sunday school classes. It was someone familiar with St. Matthew's. For weeks afterward, there were police cars outside our house and the church. Parents started picking up their kids directly from Sunday school classrooms, instead of waiting upstairs. The emergency exit got a new alarm system that actually worked. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. No children were reported missing in our area that day. The police eventually classified it as an attempted abduction, my abduction. But I know what I saw in that back seat. Sometimes I wonder if that child was from somewhere else, if they had already been missing for a while, or if whoever took them made sure nobody would report them missing at all. My parents tried to help me move past it. They switched churches, put me in therapy, and never mentioned the incident unless I brought it up first. But every Easter, I feel sick to my stomach. I can't look at Easter Bunny decorations without feeling that grip on my hand again. I'm 26 now. I've researched child abductions extensively over the years, looking for any cases that might match what happened to me, hoping to find out what happened to that child in the car. I've never found anything conclusive. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Miss Sabrina hadn't come looking for me. Would I have been that face in the window, looking out at some other lucky kid who got saved instead? Would anyone have ever known what happened to me? I still don't know who those men were or why they chose our church that day. I don't know if they ever tried again somewhere else. All I know is that Easter Sunday changed me forever, and somewhere out there might be a person who wasn't as lucky as I was, someone who didn't have a Miss Sabrina watching out for them. Story 6. I'm still shaking while typing this. It's been 2 weeks since I got home, but I can't stop thinking about what happened in Charleston. I keep replaying everything in my mind, trying to make sense of it. My friend Lena and I had been planning a spring break trip for months. We're both grad students, so money's always tight. Charleston seemed perfect, historic, beautiful, and we found this cute Airbnb that was actually affordable if we split it. Nothing fancy, just a small two-bedroom guest house behind someone's main home in the historic district. The first couple days were amazing. We visited Rainbow Row, took one of those horse-drawn carriage tours, and ate way too many biscuits. I remember feeling so relaxed walking around the Battery on our second day, watching the boats and taking stupid selfies. God, I wish we could have just frozen time right there. On our third day, we went to this tiny seafood place a local had recommended, the kind with paper tablecloths and plastic bibs. I was halfway through destroying a pile of crab legs when my phone buzzed. Just a simple text saying, "Hey," from a number I didn't recognize. I figured it was a wrong number, so I ignored it. About 5 minutes later, another text came through. "Look outside." I showed Lena, and we both glanced toward the window, but the restaurant was practically empty except for an older couple in the corner. I texted back, "Who is this?" but got no response. "Probably just one of those scam things," Lena said, but something about it felt off. We paid our bill and were walking along King Street when a third message came through with just my name. "Anna." That's when my stomach dropped. Lena saw my face and grabbed my phone. "Okay, that's creepy," she admitted. "But remember that cafe yesterday? The one with the free trip giveaway? We both put our contact info on those little cards." She was right. We'd stopped at this trendy coffee place the day before, and they had a fishbowl for a weekend getaway contest. We'd filled out these little cards with our names, phone numbers, and emails. "That has to be it," I said, trying to convince myself. Some employee being weird. I blocked the number, and we decided to head to this rooftop bar we'd heard about. The bar was on top of a hotel with an amazing view of the city. We'd been there maybe 30 minutes, sharing a plate of overpriced appetizers, when my phone buzzed again. Different number, same person, I just knew it. "That's a nice red jacket." I was wearing a red windbreaker. I frantically scanned the crowded rooftop, but there were at least 50 people there. I showed Lena the message and watched her face go pale. "We need to go." "Now," she said, throwing cash on the table. We practically ran back to our Airbnb, looking over our shoulders the whole way. I kept thinking I saw someone following us, but the streets were busy with tourists and locals, making it impossible to tell. By the time we got back, we were both breathless and terrified. We double-checked all the windows, locked the door, and drew the blinds. "Should we call the police?" I asked Lena. "And tell them what? That someone texted you about your jacket? They'll think we're being dramatic." She was right, but I still felt sick to my stomach. We tried to distract ourselves by watching Netflix, but I couldn't focus on anything. Every small noise made me jump. Around 8, we realized neither of us had eaten dinner, but there was no way we were going outside again. "Let's just order something," Lena suggested, already scrolling through Uber Eats. We ordered from a nearby burger place and selected contactless delivery. The driver was supposed to leave the food at the door, take a photo, and leave. About 40 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Not just a delivery knock, but 3 solid, deliberate knocks. I looked at Lena, confused. "I thought it was supposed to be contactless," I whispered. "It is," she whispered back. I tiptoed to the door and looked through the peephole. There was a guy standing there in a dark hoodie holding our food bag. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the bottom half. "Hello?" I called through the door. "Uber Eats. You need to sign something," he responded, his voice oddly flat. A wave of panic washed over me. I'd used Uber Eats dozens of times. They never ask for signatures, especially not for contactless deliveries. "Just leave it at the door, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can't do that. Need a signature. Policy for this restaurant, he insisted. I checked my phone. The app showed the delivery was still in progress, but there was no mention of needing a signature. I took a screenshot, hands shaking. No, I selected contactless delivery. Please just leave the food. There was a pause, and then his voice changed completely. Anna, just open the fucking door. My blood ran cold. He knew my name. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. Lena, call 911, I whispered frantically. The man started banging on the door, hard enough that the whole frame shook. Anna, open the door. I know you're in there. Lena was already on the phone with 911, her voice shaking as she gave them our address. I ran to the back of the house, checking that the rear door was locked. The banging continued, getting more violent. Then I heard what sounded like something metal scraping against the lock. He's trying to get in, I screamed to Lena, who relayed it to the dispatcher. They're sending officers now, she said, her face ghost white. They said stay away from the doors and windows. We huddled in the bathroom, the only room without windows, listening to the continuous banging and the man shouting my name. I've never been so terrified in my life. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably, and I kept thinking about how easily that door could break. Our Airbnb was behind the main house, pretty isolated. Even if we screamed, would anyone hear us over the noise of the busy street out front? After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we heard sirens. The banging suddenly stopped. Through the bathroom window, which faced the side of the house, we could see blue lights reflecting off the neighbor's white siding. We stayed frozen in place until we heard knocking again, different this time, followed by, "Police, anyone inside?" Lena answered while I stayed rooted to the bathroom floor, unable to move. I heard her talking to the officers, explaining what happened. When I finally managed to make my way to the front room, there were 2 police officers standing in our living room. A female officer approached me gently. "Are you Anna?" she asked. I nodded, still trembling. "We got him. He was only a few houses down when our units arrived." It wasn't until that moment that I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably as the adrenaline crashed. The officers asked us dozens of questions, took our statements, and collected the screenshots from my phone. What they told us next made everything even more horrifying. The man they arrested worked at the cafe where we'd entered the giveaway. He'd taken photos of our entry forms with our contact information. Based on what they found in his car, parked just down the street, he'd been following us since that afternoon. They found more photos of us walking around the city, sitting at the rooftop bar, even one of us entering our Airbnb. The real Uber Eats driver showed up while the police were still there, confused about what was happening. Apparently, the man had intercepted him on the street, convinced him to hand over our food by saying he was our friend and would take it the rest of the way. The driver admitted he shouldn't have done it but didn't think much of it at the time. The worst part came when they ran the man's information. He had a violent criminal history, including assault and stalking charges in 2 other states. The officer didn't give us specifics, but her face told us enough. He'd been targeting us because we were obviously tourists, vulnerable and away from home. We spent the rest of our vacation jumping at every sound, barely sleeping. We thought about leaving early, but flights were too expensive to change. The Airbnb host was horrified when she heard what happened and offered to refund our stay, but we were too scared to move anywhere else. At least the police knew where we were. When we finally flew home, I broke down crying again at the airport out of sheer relief. Lena and I haven't talked much about what happened since then. I think we're both trying to process it in our own ways. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd opened that door, if I hadn't noticed the discrepancy with the contactless delivery, if the police had arrived even 5 minutes later. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I can hear banging on my apartment door. The police called yesterday to let me know he's being charged with attempted breaking and entering, stalking, and a bunch of other things. They said his bail was denied because of his history. It should make me feel better, but it doesn't, not really. Because now I know how easy it is for someone to target you, to gather information about you from the most innocent interactions. I haven't entered a contest or giveaway since. I've changed my phone number. I've made all my social media private. But I still don't feel safe. I don't know if I ever will again, because the scariest part isn't what happened. It's realizing how close we came to something so much worse, all because we wrote our names on a little card for a chance to win a free weekend getaway. Story 7. I don't even know where to start. I guess I should begin with the fact that I'm 19, I have anxiety, and I made the stupidest decision of my life just 2 weeks ago. I'm still shaking as I type this. I need to get it out somewhere because I can't tell my parents. They'd never let me out of their sight again. It started on Omegle, that website where you can chat with random strangers. I was bored that night and couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd talk to some random people. Most conversations were the usual garbage, ASL, followed by disconnects or creepy messages. But then I matched with this guy who seemed different. He wanted to talk about philosophy and the meaning of life, not just the usual crap. We talked for hours, like literally all night. I told him about my anxiety, my struggles with college, how I felt stuck in my hometown. He called himself Kane and said he was 23. He seemed to understand everything I was saying in a way nobody else ever had. When the sun came up, we exchanged Discord info to keep talking. The next few days we messaged constantly. He made me laugh, made me think, made me feel seen. When he mentioned we only lived about 3 or 4 hours apart, something shifted. He suggested meeting up for a day trip, maybe go hiking or camping. I should have been more cautious, but it felt like I'd known him forever. There were red flags I completely ignored, like how he said he had 2 phones, one for work and one personal, but was super vague about his job. He'd dodge questions about it, just saying it was in tech and boring. He'd also sometimes take hours to respond and then blame it on signal issues. But I was so caught up in how he made me feel that I brushed it all aside. He suggested we go camping at Nimham Mountain in New York. I'd never been there, so I Googled it. The first thing that came up was information about arsenic contamination in the area. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off, saying, "That's old news, the water's fine now. I've been there tons of times." My parents are super protective. There was no way I could tell them I was meeting a guy from the internet, so I lied. I told them Kane was a friend from an online game I'd been playing for months, and that we were meeting up with a group of other players. They were hesitant, but eventually agreed. They've been trying to be supportive of me getting out more despite my anxiety. The day came for us to meet. We agreed on a Starbucks near my house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up while waiting. When he walked in, he looked mostly like his pictures, but older somehow. His eyes were different too, colder than they seemed in the photos he'd sent. We spent about an hour there, and he seemed nice enough, though he kept checking his phone and looking around like he was nervous about something. Then we got in his car for the 4-hour drive to Nimham Mountain. That's when things started getting weird. He talked about himself nonstop. Every question I asked somehow turned into a story about him. If I mentioned liking a band, He'd cut me off to explain why his taste in music was superior. If I tried to talk about my anxiety, he'd interrupt to tell me how he fixed his own mental health issues through pure willpower. About 2 hours in, he started making little comments about my appearance. Nothing overtly sexual, just little judgments that made me uncomfortable. "You'd look better with longer hair," or "that shirt doesn't really suit your body type." Each comment made me shrink a little more into the passenger seat. Then he started telling me about his games on Omegle. He said sometimes he'd pretend to be a Russian soldier and describe torturing people in graphic detail just to see their reactions. He laughed while telling me this, like it was the funniest thing in the world. My stomach dropped, but I forced a smile because we were in the middle of nowhere, and I was trapped in his car. We stopped at a Whole Foods to get supplies. When it came time to pay, his card wouldn't work. He made a big show of trying it multiple times before looking at me expectantly. I ended up paying for everything, about $80 worth of food and supplies. As we left, I caught him smirking to himself. By the time we reached Nimham Mountain, the sun was setting. I was exhausted, anxious, and regretting every decision that led me there. Then Kane announced he didn't want to camp after all because it was too cold. Instead, he suggested we sleep in his car in the parking lot. The parking lot was completely deserted. No other cars, no ranger station, nothing but trees and darkness surrounding us. My phone showed only 1 bar of service. I felt sick. "I'm not comfortable sleeping in the car," I told him. "Let's either set up the tent or find a motel." "Don't be ridiculous," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "It's too dark to set up now, and motels around here are sketchy. The car is safer." I suggested we drive back home, even though it was late. He refused, saying he was too tired to drive. That's when I knew I was in serious trouble. As night fell completely, he started moving closer to me in the car. He put his hand on my leg and said, "We should get more comfortable." I froze. Everything in me was screaming to run, but where would I go? We were miles from anywhere, in the dark, surrounded by forest. What happened next is still hard to type. He forced himself on me. I said no. I pushed him away. I cried. None of it mattered. He was stronger, and he didn't stop. When it was over, he just reclined his seat and went to sleep like nothing had happened, while I sat there in shock, trying not to make a sound as I cried. I considered running, but I had no idea where I was. I thought about calling for help, but I was afraid he would wake up and take my phone. I was terrified he might hurt me worse if he knew I was trying to get away. So I just sat there, wide awake all night, watching the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock, waiting for morning. When the sun finally came up, Kane acted like nothing had happened. He stretched, smiled at me, and asked if I wanted to get breakfast. I was numb. I just nodded, hoping that in a public place I might find help. We drove to a diner about 20 minutes away. As we sat there, he started talking about future trips we could take. I was barely listening until I heard him give his credit card to the waitress. The name on it wasn't Kane. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said, "Kane's just what my friends call me." Then he mentioned something about turning 22 next month. Not 23, 22. On the drive back, we got pulled over for running a stop sign. The officer asked for his license and registration, and as Kane handed them over, I saw his real name. It wasn't anything close to Kane. I wanted to scream for help, to tell the officer what had happened, but I froze. The officer just gave him a warning and let us go. As soon as the police car was out of sight, something in me snapped. I started screaming at him. All the fear and rage came pouring out. I called him every horrible name I could think of. I demanded he take me home immediately. "You're overreacting," he kept saying. "We had a good time." When we finally reached my house, I grabbed my backpack and threw it onto the lawn. "Get the fuck away from me," I shouted. "If you ever contact me again, I'll go to the police." He looked shocked, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I was upset. That's what terrifies me the most when I think back on it. The blank confusion on his face, like he truly believed what happened was okay. That night, I got a text from him. "I'm sorry about what happened. Getting pulled over was my karma for it." I blocked his number immediately. It's been 2 weeks, and I still can't sleep properly. I jump at every sound. I can't stand being alone. I haven't told anyone what really happened. Not my parents, not my friends. The shame and fear are overwhelming. Yesterday, something made me Google Nimham Mountain again. In the search results, I saw something I'd missed before, a link to Cane Mountain North Trail. Cane Mountain, not Cane. And suddenly it hit me. He might have named himself after his hunting ground. Was I the first person he'd taken there? Would I have been the first person he left there? I don't know what to do. I'm afraid to go to the police because my parents will find out I lied to them. I'm afraid he knows where I live. I'm afraid he'll find someone else. Every time my phone buzzes with a notification, my heart stops for a second. I keep wondering if I'll ever feel safe again, or if this fear is just my life now. But mostly, I keep thinking about that name, Cane Mountain, and wondering how many others might be out there, trapped in their own silence, carrying the same scars from the same monster. Story 8. It's been 2 weeks since we got back from Red Feathers Lake, and I still can't sleep through the night. I've typed this out maybe 5 different times and deleted it each time, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar or can explain what the hell happened up there. My wife Maria, her brother Dave, and his 3 boys, Jake 8, Michael 6, and Ethan 5, planned this camping trip months ago. We wanted somewhere really remote, away from the usual tourist spots where you're practically sharing a bathroom with the next campsite over. Dave found this spot about 20 miles down a dirt road in northern Colorado near Red Feathers Lake. No facilities, no rangers, just pure wilderness. We have 2 German shepherds, Rex and Luna, who love these trips as much as we do. The drive-in was beautiful but rough. Our Subaru handled it fine, but Dave's minivan bottomed out a few times. We joked about turning back, but the boys were so excited, and honestly, we were too. The spot was perfect, a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest with mountains in the distance. No cell service, no other people for miles. Just what we wanted. The first day was amazing. We set up our tents, one for Maria and me, one for Dave and the boys. We gathered firewood, the kids explored the immediate area with strict boundaries, and we cooked hot dogs and s'mores. That night, we all sat around pointing out constellations. The stars out there were unbelievable, like someone had spilled glitter across black velvet. It was the second evening when things started getting weird. We'd spent the day hiking and fishing at a small stream about half a mile from camp. Everyone was tired but happy. As we were starting dinner prep, I noticed Rex and Luna acting strange. They kept pacing the perimeter of our campsite, hackles raised, stopping occasionally to stare into the trees. Rex, especially, kept growling, this low, rumbling sound that I'd never heard from him before. "What's wrong with the dogs?" Maria asked, noticing it too. "Probably just a deer or something," Dave said, but he didn't sound convinced. I walked over to where Rex was fixated and peered into the trees. The sun was setting, and the forest was getting dark fast. I couldn't see anything unusual, but something felt off, like the forest itself was holding its breath. "Hey, buddy, what do you see?" I said, putting my hand on Rex's head. He whined and pressed against my leg, still staring into the trees. We called the dogs back to camp and tried to ignore their strange behavior. The boys were oblivious, excited about roasting marshmallows, but I noticed Dave checking the tree line more often than usual. That night, after the kids were asleep, the three of us adults sat by the fire drinking beer and talking quietly. The forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just the crackling of our fire. "Is it just me, or does it feel like we're being watched?" Maria whispered. I'd been thinking the same thing but didn't want to say it out loud. The back of my neck had been tingling for the past hour. "It's just the isolation," Dave said, but he was scanning the darkness beyond our firelight. "Gets to your head after a while." Around midnight, we decided to turn in. The dogs refused to enter our tent, instead positioning themselves between our tents and whatever they sensed in the forest. I lay awake for hours, listening to Rex's occasional growls and Luna's whining. The morning brought temporary relief. Sunlight filtered through the trees, birds were singing, and last night's unease seemed silly in the daylight. Until we noticed our water situation. We'd brought 5 5-gallon jugs of water, enough for our 3-day trip plus emergency reserves. 3 of them were completely empty, not just low, but bone dry. "Did you use water for something last night?" I asked Dave. He shook his head, looking confused. "I thought you guys might have." We checked for leaks but found nothing. The caps were still tightly secured. It was as if someone had opened them, emptied them, and carefully closed them again. "Maybe we used more than we thought," Maria suggested, but her voice wavered. We all knew we hadn't used 25 gallons of water in one day. The boys were getting restless, so Dave suggested a hike to take our minds off things. The day passed uneventfully, but there was an undercurrent of tension. We all kept looking over our shoulders, and the dogs stayed unusually close to us. That evening, we agreed to leave first thing in the morning. We didn't discuss why, not in front of the kids, but we all felt it. Something wasn't right here. After dinner, to keep the boys' spirits up, Dave suggested a snipe hunt, that old camping tradition where you tell kids about a made-up creature and send them hunting for it with bags and flashlights. It was just before sunset, still light enough to see, and we needed something to distract from the growing unease. "Remember, stay where we can see you," Maria reminded the boys as they giggled and ran around the edges of our campsite, holding their paper bags and making snipe calls. I was watching Jake, the oldest, who'd wandered a bit further than the others but was still in sight. Suddenly, he jumped back with a yelp. "Something threw a rock at me," he called out, more surprised than scared. Dave laughed. "Probably just knocked one loose while you were climbing around, buddy." Then another rock sailed out from between the trees, missing Michael by inches. This was no accident. It had force behind it. Before I could react, something hard hit me square in the back, hard enough to knock the wind out of me. "What the hell?" Dave shouted, running toward the boys. That's when I saw it. Just for a split second, between 2 pine trees about 30 yards away, something tall and impossibly thin, watching us. It wasn't a person. The proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head too small, or maybe too narrow. I couldn't make out details in the fading light, just an impression of something that should not exist. Then it was gone. "Everyone back to camp, now!" I yelled, grabbing Ethan, who was closest to me. The dogs were going crazy, barking and running in circles. More rocks came flying from different directions. One hit Dave in the shoulder, another struck our cooler with enough force to knock it over. The boys were crying now, and Maria was pulling them toward the tents. "We need to leave," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "Right now." We threw essential items into our vehicles in record time. The boys were huddled in the minivan with Luna while we grabbed sleeping bags and the cooler. Rex wouldn't stop barking at the forest's edge. That's when we heard it, crashing through the underbrush, heading straight for us. Not one thing, but several, coming from different directions. The sound of snapping branches and heavy movement surrounded us. "Go, go, go!" I screamed, jumping into our Subaru with Rex as Dave slammed the minivan door. Maria turned the key and our engine roared to life just as something burst from the tree line. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We peeled out of that clearing, tires spinning on dirt and pine needles, following Dave's taillights down the crude trail that led back to the main dirt road. About a mile from our campsite, we had to slow down. The narrow road was suddenly littered with bones. Not just a few, but hundreds of them. Small animal skeletons, deer parts, things I couldn't identify. They stretched for almost a mile along the road, as if someone had been collecting them and laying them out in some kind of sick display. In the middle of this bone-strewn path sat an old, faded green school bus. Its windows were covered with yellowed newspaper, and strange symbols were painted on its side. Not graffiti, but deliberate markings that made my skin crawl just looking at them. Dave had stopped, probably shocked by what we were seeing. I honked, flashing my lights for him to keep moving, but he'd already gotten out of his van. "Dave, get back in the car," Maria screamed out her window. He motioned for us to come look, his face pale in our headlights. Against my better judgment, I got out, telling Maria to lock the doors and keep the engine running. The bus door was hanging open. Dave pointed to a massive fire pit behind it, filled with charred bones and what looked like animal skins. Hanging from the trees around the bus were more animal carcasses in various states of decay. Some fresh, some nothing but hide stretched over bone frames. "We need to go," I whispered, feeling watched again. "Now." As if to emphasize my point, Rex started that deep, threatening growl again, staring back up the road toward our abandoned campsite. I swear I could hear movement in the trees around us. We didn't speak again until we hit pavement, almost an hour later. The kids had fallen into an exhausted sleep in the back of Dave's van. We pulled over at a gas station, the fluorescent lights and normalcy of it almost shocking after what we'd experienced. "What was that?" Dave asked, his hand still shaking as he filled his van. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm never going back there." We filed a report with the local sheriff the next day, but I could tell from his face that he thought we were exaggerating or confused. He said he'd send someone to check it out, but I doubt anything came of it. It's been 2 weeks now. The bruise where that rock hit me is still there, a perfect circular mark that won't fade. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking I can hear something moving outside our suburban home. Rex and Luna won't go into our backyard after dark anymore. I keep thinking about what I saw between those trees. What was watching us? What chased us out? I've researched local legends, missing persons reports, anything that might explain it, but found nothing concrete. All I know is that something was out there in those woods, something that didn't want us there. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel it watching me through the trees. Story 9. I still have a hard time talking about what happened that Sunday night at Pizza Notturna. It's been 2 months, and I still wake up in cold sweats, thinking I hear that damn bell ringing. I guess writing it down might help me process everything, so here goes. I'd been working at Pizza Notturna for about 8 months. It's this 24-hour pizza joint in Solitary Ridge. Not exactly gourmet stuff, but when you're the only place open past midnight in a town like ours, you don't need to be. The owner hired me specifically for the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. The pay was decent, and honestly, I preferred working alone. No manager breathing down my neck. I could play my own music, and most nights were chill, just a few drunk college kids or truck drivers stopping in for a slice. That Sunday started like any other. I came in at 10:45, chatted with Ellie from the evening shift while she finished cleaning up, and took over around 11. Sundays were usually dead quiet after midnight. Most people had work or school the next day. I made a few deliveries early on, then settled in for what I expected to be another boring night. Around 1 in the morning, I was scrolling through my phone behind the counter when I heard the entry bell ring. You know, that little electronic ding that sounds whenever someone opens the front door. I quickly shoved my phone in my pocket and looked up, ready to greet whoever had come in. But there was nobody there. I frowned, thinking maybe someone had opened the door and immediately changed their mind. It happened sometimes, drunk people realizing they didn't have money or whatever. I walked around the counter and checked outside. The parking lot was completely empty except for my beat-up Honda Civic. The road was deserted too, streetlights casting this eerie orange glow on the empty asphalt. Not a soul in sight. I shrugged it off. The bell was probably malfunctioning. The place wasn't exactly well maintained. The oven barely worked half the time, and the refrigerator made this weird humming noise that drove me nuts. I went back behind the counter and continued my shift. Made a few pizzas for the morning prep, wiped down the tables, swept the floor, just keeping busy. About 30 minutes later, the bell rang again. This time I moved faster, thinking I might catch whoever was messing with me. But again, nobody there. I actually stepped outside this time, looking around more carefully. Nothing. Just the sound of crickets and the distant hum of the highway. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I wasn't scared yet, just confused and slightly annoyed. Was some kid playing a prank? The bell shouldn't go off unless someone opened the door. I checked the sensor above the door frame, but it seemed fine. Whatever. I had work to do. Between 2 and 3 in the morning was always the deadest time of the night. I didn't expect any customers, so I used the time to prep dough for the morning shift. The bell rang one more time during this period. This time, I didn't even bother checking. Just yelled out, "We're open if you actually want to come in," and continued working. Looking back, I wish I'd just locked the door and called someone. But hindsight's 20/20, right? By 4 a.m., I hadn't seen a single customer for hours. I decided to start counting the register early, getting ready for the morning shift that would arrive at 7. The store was dead quiet, except for the buzzing of the fluorescent lights and that annoying hum from the refrigerator. I had turned off my music earlier because it was making me jumpy every time a song ended. That's when I felt it. That feeling when you just know something isn't right. Like the air pressure in the room had changed. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I had this overwhelming sensation of being watched. You know that feeling? When your brain is screaming at you that something's wrong before you consciously realize it? I told myself I was being paranoid. Too many horror movies, too many nights alone in this place. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like a weight pressing down on my chest. I tried to focus on counting the bills in the register, but my hands were shaking. The silence in the shop suddenly felt oppressive. I could hear my own heartbeat. my own breathing, and then something else. A soft sound behind me, the faintest creak of weight shifting on our worn linoleum floor. I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed up. I slowly turned around, praying I'd see nothing, praying it was just my imagination. It wasn't. A man was standing there, maybe 5 or 6 meters away, on the customer side of the counter. The counter formed an L shape, with me in the corner. He was wearing these filthy black clothes, torn jeans, a black hoodie. But what made my blood run cold was his face, or rather, the lack of it. He had pulled his t-shirt up over his nose and mouth like a makeshift mask. Only his eyes were visible, bloodshot, dark, and completely empty. They weren't angry or sad or anything human, just vacant, like looking into a bottomless pit. In his left hand was a knife, not a kitchen knife or a pocket knife, but something bigger, like a hunting knife. His knuckles were white from gripping it so tightly. The blade caught the fluorescent light, and I could see it was already stained with something dark. For what felt like forever, we just stared at each other. My brain couldn't process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This kind of shit didn't happen in Solitary Ridge. I finally managed to speak, my voice barely a whisper. "Take whatever you want from the register. I don't care." He didn't respond, didn't move, just kept staring with those dead eyes. That's when true terror hit me. This wasn't a robbery. If he wanted money, he would have demanded it. This was something else. I glanced at the front door, calculating my chances. The counter formed an L shape, with me in the corner and him blocking the only way out from behind the counter. I'd have to run past him to reach the door. Impossible. My mind raced through my options. The back door was through the kitchen, but I'd have to move deeper into the building, away from any potential help. The phone was on the wall near the register, but what good would that do? Police would take minutes to arrive. I'd be dead in seconds. That's when the man took a step forward, just one, slow and deliberate, then another. Pure instinct took over. I lunged across the counter, not around it. I wasn't thinking clearly, just desperate to put something between us. I slammed into the countertop, scrambled across it, knocking over the napkin dispenser and the little tip jar. I fell hard on the other side, pain shooting through my shoulder, but adrenaline kept me moving. As I struggled to my feet, I caught a glimpse of his face. The shirt had slipped down, and what I saw, God, I'll never forget it. His mouth was stretched into this unnatural grin, teeth bared like an animal. It wasn't a human expression. It was pure, unfiltered bloodlust. He lunged at me with shocking speed. I barely dodged, feeling the knife slash through the air inches from my face. I bolted for the door, yanking it open with such force I thought the glass would shatter. The bell rang as I burst outside, feet pounding on the pavement as I ran blindly into the night. I didn't look back until I'd sprinted about 100 meters down the road. When I finally dared to glance over my shoulder, I saw him standing in the doorway of Pizza Notturna, just watching me. He wasn't running after me anymore, just standing there, knife at his side, those empty eyes fixed on me even from that distance. I kept running until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. The attendant took one look at my face and immediately called the police. I was hyperventilating, couldn't get the words out at first, just kept pointing in the direction of the pizza place. The cops arrived within 5 minutes, but by then, it was too late. When they went to check out Pizza Notturna, they found the place destroyed. Tables overturned, glass everywhere, the register emptied. But the worst part? The sick bastard had gone back inside after I escaped and trashed everything. He'd used his knife to slash open every bag of flour, every container of sauce. He'd written something on the wall too, but the police wouldn't tell me what it said. And my car, my Honda that was parked outside, he'd slashed all 4 tires and carved something into the hood. Again, the cops wouldn't let me see it. The police said he must have been hiding somewhere in the shop for at least an hour, watching me, using the doorbell as a distraction, probably checking to see how I'd react. Maybe he was in the bathroom or the storage closet or even the walk-in fridge, just watching, waiting for the right moment. They never caught him, never identified him. The security cameras had been disabled. That's what the detective told me. Disabled, like the guy knew exactly what he was doing and where everything was. I quit that job the next day. Couldn't even bring myself to go back for my last paycheck. I still have nightmares about those eyes, that unnatural grin. I've moved in with my parents temporarily. Can't stand being alone at night anymore. The worst part is not knowing why. Why me? Why that night? Was it random, or was I specifically targeted? I'll probably never know. But every time I hear a bell ring, my heart stops for a second. And I can't help but look over my shoulder, half expecting to see those empty eyes staring back at me. Story 10. Last weekend was supposed to be a relaxing camping trip. Instead, I witnessed something that keeps replaying in my mind like a nightmare I can't shake. I've been camping at Watkins Glen State Park in upstate New York for years. It's always been my escape, beautiful gorges, hiking trails, and peaceful campsites. But after what happened 3 days ago, I don't know if I'll ever look at camping the same way. I arrived at the park around noon on Saturday with my dog Cooper, a golden retriever who loves these trips as much as I do. We got our usual spot, number 42, which sits on a bit of a flat area with a good view of the entrance road. It's perfect because Cooper can roam around a bit without bothering other campers, and I can see who's coming and going. After setting up my tent and organizing my gear, Cooper and I were just relaxing in our folding chairs. I was sipping coffee, watching other campers arrive and set up. That's when I first noticed them. An older woman, probably in her 60s, a younger woman who looked to be in her 30s, her daughter, I assumed, and a little girl around 8 or 9. They were trying to maneuver a shiny new teardrop trailer into Site 38, which is across from mine and sits on a pretty steep slope. I could tell right away they were struggling. The younger woman was driving a mid-sized SUV that seemed barely powerful enough to tow the trailer, and she kept stopping and starting, unable to back it in correctly. The older woman was trying to guide her, but they weren't communicating well. The little girl was just sitting on a nearby picnic table, swinging her legs and watching. I considered going over to help, but Cooper was getting antsy, and I figured they'd eventually get it or ask for assistance. After about 20 minutes of watching them struggle, I decided to take Cooper for a quick walk. When we returned maybe 15 minutes later, they had managed to get the trailer sort of positioned in their sight, but not great. What happened next is something I'll never forget. The grandmother was standing behind the trailer while the younger woman was at the hitch. I heard the younger woman say something like, "Is this good enough, Mom? I'm just going to unhitch it here." I immediately felt uneasy. Their trailer wasn't perpendicular to the slope, but was facing slightly downhill, and I didn't see any wheel chocks in place. Anyone who's ever towed anything knows that's a disaster waiting to happen. Before I could even yell out a warning, the younger woman unlatched the trailer from the SUV. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The moment the trailer disconnected, it started rolling backward, slowly at first, almost deceptively so, but picking up speed with each passing second. The grandmother, who was still standing behind it, seemed frozen for a split second before she lunged forward, trying to stop the trailer with her bare hands. It was an instinctive reaction, I guess, but completely futile against a 1,000-pound trailer. The trailer knocked her down like she was nothing, and then, God, I still get sick thinking about it, it rolled right over her lower body. I dropped Cooper's leash and sprinted toward them. The younger woman was screaming, the little girl was crying, and other campers were starting to run over too. The trailer kept rolling, dragging the grandmother along for about 15 feet before it crashed into the tree line with a sickening crunch of metal and wood. When I reached the grandmother, she was conscious but in obvious agony. Her legs were twisted at unnatural angles, and there was blood soaking through her pants. I'm not a medical professional, but I've done some first aid training for my job, so I knew not to move her. I just knelt beside her, told her to stay still, and tried to keep her talking while someone else called 911. "My name's Mark," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Help is coming. Try not to move." She was gasping for breath, her face contorted in pain. "I can't feel my legs," she kept saying. "Where's Sarah? Where's Emily?" Those must have been her daughter and granddaughter. The wait for the ambulance felt like an eternity. The park ranger arrived first, about 7 minutes after the accident. He took one look at the situation and radioed for additional medical support. The grandmother's condition was deteriorating quickly. Her skin was turning pale and clammy, and she was becoming less responsive. I later learned these were signs of shock and internal bleeding. The paramedics finally arrived after what must have been 15 minutes, but felt like hours. They worked quickly, stabilizing her neck and spine before carefully moving her onto a backboard. One of them told me her blood pressure was dangerously low, a bad sign. They started an IV right there in the dirt and loaded her into the ambulance. The daughter was in such a state of shock that another camper had to take care of the little girl, who couldn't stop crying. I overheard the paramedics telling the daughter they were taking her mother to the local hospital in Watkins Glen first for stabilization, but she would likely need to be airlifted to the trauma center in Rochester. After the ambulance left, the campground fell into a strange silence. The park rangers cordoned off the area around the trailer, which was now wedged between two large oak trees about 20 feet down the slope. The front was completely crushed, and there was a visible trail of disturbed earth and blood where the grandmother had been dragged. I sat back at my campsite with Cooper, feeling numb. The little girl and her mother were taken to the hospital by a park ranger, and the rest of us campers just stared at each other, processing what we'd witnessed. That night was surreal. Nobody in the surrounding campsites played music or had campfires. Everyone spoke in hushed tones. I couldn't sleep at all, just kept replaying the moment in my head. The look on the grandmother's face when she realized what was happening, the terrible sound of her body being hit and dragged. The next morning, a park employee came by to ask if anyone had witnessed the accident. They needed statements for their report. I told him everything I saw, including the fact that they hadn't chocked the wheels or positioned the trailer correctly. He nodded grimly and said this wasn't the first accident they'd had with trailers on the sloped sites, though it was definitely the worst. Later that day, I overheard from other campers that the grandmother had suffered multiple broken bones, including her pelvis and both femurs, plus serious internal injuries. She'd been airlifted to Rochester as expected and was in critical condition. The campground host told someone that doctors were fighting to save her legs. I decided to stay the full 3 days I'd planned, partly because I was too shaken to drive home right away, and partly because I felt this strange need to see how things turned out. The trailer remained wedged in the trees the entire time. a grim reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. A towing company came to assess the situation, but said they'd need specialized equipment to remove it without causing further damage to the trees or the campground. On my last day, I ran into a different park ranger who'd been talking to the family. He told me the grandmother was still in intensive care, but had stabilized somewhat. She would need multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. The family had been staying at a hotel near the hospital in Rochester. What haunts me most is how preventable it all was. A pair of $15 wheel chocks could have avoided the whole tragedy. Or just positioning the trailer perpendicular to the slope instead of parallel with it. Or even just having someone stand at the tongue of the trailer rather than behind it during unhitching. I've been home for 3 days now, and I still can't stop thinking about it. I keep seeing the grandmother's face, hearing the daughter's screams. Cooper seems to sense something's wrong. He's been sticking close to me, nudging my hand when I zone out. This morning, I looked up proper trailer safety procedures online. It turns out there are so many precautions that should be taken when parking on an incline. Chocking both sides of the wheels, using stabilizer jacks, leaving the trailer attached to the vehicle until it's secured, making sure the trailer is perpendicular to the slope. Basic things that could save lives. I've been camping for over 15 years and towing my own small utility trailer for projects around the house. But this incident has made me double-check every safety procedure I thought I knew. I even ordered additional wheel chocks for my own trailer. The image of that teardrop trailer rolling backward keeps flashing in my mind. The way it picked up speed so quickly, how helpless the grandmother looked trying to stop it. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, someone's life was forever changed. And for what? A few minutes saved by not taking proper precautions? I don't know why I'm sharing this here. Maybe as a warning to others. Maybe just to process what I saw. But if you're camping, especially with a trailer, please take the time to secure it properly. No matter how tired you are, no matter how eager you are to set up camp and relax, those few extra minutes could save someone's life. That shiny new teardrop trailer, probably a source of excitement and future adventures for that family, is now a twisted wreck. And somewhere in a hospital room in Rochester, a grandmother is fighting to recover from injuries that never should have happened. I can't help but wonder if they'll ever go camping again. I honestly don't know if I will. Story 11. I'm still having trouble sleeping properly after what happened last weekend. Every little noise makes me jump, and I keep checking my doors and windows. I know it sounds dramatic, but when someone you barely know breaks into your friend's place with a knife while you're sleeping, it messes with your head in ways I can't even explain. It all started when my buddies convinced me to go to Deltopia at UC Santa Barbara. For those who don't know, it's this massive beach party weekend that happens every spring quarter. Thousands of students from all over California flood the tiny community of Isla Vista to party for an entire weekend. I'm a senior at another UC campus about 2 hours away, and honestly, I've always avoided Deltopia. The stories about police in riot gear, drunk people falling off cliffs, and general chaos never appealed to me. But my friends Hunter, Damon, Benjamin, and Armand wouldn't take no for an answer this year. It's our last year of college, man. We have to do Deltopia at least once before we graduate, Hunter kept saying. The clincher was that Hunter's sister Marisa lives in Isla Vista in a 2-bedroom apartment, and she offered to let us crash there for the weekend. Free accommodation sealed the deal, so I reluctantly agreed. We drove down Friday afternoon, arrived around 4, and settled into Marissa's place. It was a typical college apartment: cramped living room, tiny kitchen, and barely enough floor space for all of us to spread our sleeping bags. Marissa and her roommate were cool about giving up their living room to 5 guys, which was pretty generous. Around 6, we decided to make a liquor store run to stock up for the weekend. We were walking back to the apartment, arms full of bags, when I heard someone call Hunter's name from across the street. "Hunter! Hey, Hunter!" I turned to see this guy jogging toward us. Hunter's face immediately fell, which I found strange. The guy was average height, wearing expensive-looking clothes and designer sunglasses. "Oh, hey, Amir," Hunter said, sounding completely unenthusiastic. "What are you doing here?" This Amir guy explained he was visiting some friends for Deltopia too, but something about his story seemed off. He kept looking at our bags of alcohol with this weird intensity. "So, where are you guys staying?" Amir asked, falling into step with us. Hunter gave a vague answer about staying with his sister, but Amir kept pressing for details. "Which apartment complex? I might know it." The questions continued until Hunter reluctantly mentioned the street name, hoping that would satisfy him. Instead, Amir said, "That's perfect. I was supposed to crash with my buddy, but he's got too many people already. I can just stay with you guys." The 5 of us exchanged uncomfortable glances. None of us really knew this guy except Hunter, who clearly wasn't thrilled to see him. Hunter explained that we were already cramming 5 guys into a small living room, and his sister wouldn't be okay with adding someone else. Amir wouldn't take the hint. "It's no problem. I can sleep anywhere. Even just a corner of the floor is fine." We reached Maurice's apartment, and Amir followed us right up to the door like he was part of our group. Hunter finally had to be direct. "Look, Amir, I'm sorry, but you can't stay here. My sister was clear about how many people could crash, and we're already at the limit." Amir's friendly demeanor instantly changed. His face hardened, and he got this intense look in his eyes that made me uncomfortable. "So you're just going to leave me with nowhere to stay during Deltopia, when everything's booked?" Hunter stood his ground. "I'm sorry, man. I don't know what to tell you. We didn't invite you to come with us." After an awkward silence that felt like forever, Amir finally shrugged. "Whatever, man. Your loss." He turned and walked away, glancing back once with this expression I can't even describe, somewhere between hurt and hatred. Once inside, Hunter explained that Amir was someone from his economics class last quarter who had gotten weirdly attached to him. They'd worked on one group project together, and afterward, Amir kept texting him constantly and showing up wherever Hunter was. "He's just one of those guys who doesn't understand personal boundaries," Hunter said. "I've been trying to distance myself from him all quarter." We brushed off the encounter and focused on enjoying our night. So, streets were already filling with people in party mode. Music blasted from apartments all around us, and the energy was infectious. We spent that night drinking at Maurice's place, and then bar hopping along Del Playa Drive, the main party street that runs along the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Saturday was the main Deltopia day. We woke up around 11, nursing mild hangovers, and spent the afternoon going from one house party to another. I actually started having fun despite my initial reluctance. The weather was perfect, sunny and 75 degrees, and the whole community had this buzzing energy that was hard not to get caught up in. Around 6 that evening, Hunter got oddly quiet while checking his phone. When I asked what was wrong, he showed me his screen. It was his Snapchat location, and he pointed out that it showed Amir was nearby, like within 100 feet of us nearby. "I never share my location with random people," Hunter said, looking concerned. "I don't even remember adding him on Snapchat." We scanned the crowd but didn't see Amir. Hunter quickly turned off his location sharing and blocked Amir on Snapchat. "That's creepy as hell," Damon said, and we all agreed. Still, we figured it was just Amir being socially awkward and not realizing how stalkerish his behavior seemed. The rest of Saturday went by without incident. We partied until about 2 in the morning before stumbling back to Marissa's apartment and passing out in our sleeping bags in the living room. I was exhausted and fell asleep almost instantly. I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it. Tiny pieces of glass continuing to fall and tinkle against the floor. I checked my phone. 4:17 in the morning. The living room was dark except for the dim light coming through the blinds from the street lamps outside. My first instinct was to wake the others, but looking around, I realized everyone was in a deep, alcohol-induced sleep. Even the noise hadn't stirred them. I sat up slowly, trying to identify where the sound had come from. That's when I felt a cool breeze. The sliding glass door to the small balcony was shattered, with a gaping hole in the middle. Glass shards covered the floor nearby. My heart started racing. Had someone broken in? Was someone still in the apartment? I strained my eyes in the darkness, trying to make out any movement. The logical part of my brain said it was probably just drunk Deltopia revelers throwing something that accidentally hit the glass door. But another part of me felt something was very wrong. I carefully got up, avoiding the glass, and moved toward the light switch. As I passed the hallway closet, I swear I heard movement inside, a subtle shifting, like someone adjusting their position. I froze, my blood turning cold. The closet door was closed, but I was almost certain someone was in there. Instead of opening it myself, thank God, I decided to wake Hunter. I crept back to him and shook his shoulder, whispering urgently, "Hunter, wake up. I think someone's in the apartment." He groaned and rolled over, still half asleep. "What are you talking about?" "The balcony door is shattered, and I think someone's hiding in the hallway closet," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. That got his attention. He sat up, suddenly alert, and I pointed to the broken glass door. He saw it and immediately tensed. "Wake the others," he whispered back, reaching for his phone. I quietly roused Damon, Benjamin, and Armand, while Hunter turned on the flashlight on his phone. The 5 of us huddled together, trying to decide what to do. "I'm calling the cops," Hunter said, but before he could dial, we heard another subtle noise from the closet. Hunter pointed his flashlight toward the hallway. We all froze, staring at the closet door, which was now slightly ajar, definitely closed when I walked past it earlier. "Hello?" Hunter called out, his voice stronger than I expected. "We know someone's in there. The police are on their way." No response, just an eerie silence. We decided to check it together, safety in numbers. The 5 of us approached the closet slowly, armed with whatever we could grab, a lamp, a bottle, a metal water flask. Hunter reached for the door handle and yanked it open in one quick motion. The closet was empty, but on the floor lay a large kitchen knife, one that I recognized from Marissa's knife block. It hadn't been there before. Someone had been hiding in that closet with a knife and had slipped out while I was waking everyone up. We immediately checked on Marissa and her roommate, who were thankfully unharmed but terrified when we woke them. Hunter called the police, who arrived about 20 minutes later. They were dismissive, saying property damage was common during Deltopia and that the knife was probably just displaced during a drunken moment by one of us. They took a report but made it clear this wasn't high on their priority list. After they left, we found a large rock on the balcony, obviously what had been used to break the glass. While cleaning up, Hunter tried calling Amir, but discovered he'd been blocked on every platform. We all checked our phones and found the same. Amir had blocked all of us. That's when we knew for certain it was him. We spent the rest of that night taking shifts, staying awake, too afraid to all sleep at once. We left first thing in the morning, cutting our Deltopia weekend short. On the drive home, we pieced together what must have happened. Amir had tracked Hunter's location, followed us to the apartment, and when rejected, decided to break in. The thought of him hiding in that closet with a knife while we slept makes my skin crawl. It's been 5 days now, and Amir has completely disappeared. He hasn't shown up to the classes he shares with Hunter, and his social media accounts have gone quiet. What terrifies me most is that he knows where we all live. He could have easily gone through our wallets while we slept. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did, or if I had opened that closet door myself instead of getting Hunter. I've filed a report with campus police at my school, but without proof beyond circumstantial evidence, there's not much they can do. I jump at every noise now. I double-check my locks before bed. I keep wondering if he's watching me, tracking me, waiting for another opportunity. The worst part is not knowing if he's given up or just biding his time. How do you protect yourself from someone who seems normal until they're standing in your home with a knife? Story 12. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. I'm a pretty logical bloke. I work in IT, I like football, and I've always thought there's a reasonable explanation for most things. That was until last summer, when something happened in our house that I still can't explain to this day. Me, my girlfriend Olivia, and our 18-month-old daughter Lily live in this modest 2-bedroom council house just outside Birmingham. Nothing fancy, just a typical 1940s build with thin walls and drafty windows. We moved in about 2 years ago, and everything was completely normal at first. The previous tenant was an elderly woman who passed away, but that didn't bother us. People die in houses all the time, right? It started with the knocking. One night in June of 2020, Olivia and I were lying in bed watching Netflix when we heard it. 3 distinct knocks coming from outside our bedroom wall. Not the inside wall, but the exterior one. Our bedroom is on the 2nd floor, and there's at least a 20-foot drop on that side of the house. I remember looking at Olivia and seeing the confusion on her face. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her eyes wide. I got up and looked out the window, but there was nothing there, just darkness and our small back garden below. No ladder, no scaffolding, nothing that could explain someone knocking on our wall from the outside. I told myself it was probably just the house settling, or maybe a bird hitting the window. But deep down, I knew birds don't knock 3 times in succession. We tried to brush it off, but over the next few days, the knocking continued. Always 3 knocks, always from impossible places. Then came that night in July. It was around 11, and we were getting ready for bed. Our Ring doorbell suddenly chimed. I checked the app on my phone, but there was no notification, no footage of anyone at the door. I went to the window to look down at our front door anyway, just to be sure. There was absolutely no one there. As I turned away from the window, there was this massive bang on our bedroom door. It wasn't like someone had knocked. It was like someone had slammed their full body weight against it. The door actually shook in its frame. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Olivia, weirdly enough, burst into nervous laughter. That's just how she reacts to fear. I stood there frozen for what felt like ages before finally working up the courage to open the door. The hallway was completely empty. Lily was fast asleep in her cot in the next room. I checked immediately. Our cat, Milo, was sitting at the top of the stairs, looking as calm as anything. I searched the entire house, even though I knew there was no way someone could have hit our door that hard and then disappeared without making a sound on our creaky floorboards. Nothing was out of place. No windows or doors left open. Nothing. A few weeks later, Olivia was at her driving lesson, and I was home alone with Lily, who was napping. I was in the living room watching telly when I heard the sound of running water. At first, I thought it was just rain hitting the windows, but it sounded too consistent. When I went into the kitchen, both taps in the sink were turned on full blast. Water was gushing out, nearly overflowing the sink. I know I hadn't used the kitchen since making a cup of tea an hour earlier, and I definitely hadn't left the taps on. Lily was still in her cot, too young to reach the taps, even if she could have somehow climbed out without me noticing. I was so freaked out that I video called my mom. I needed someone else to witness this because I was starting to think I was losing it. I showed her the taps and told her what happened. She tried to calm me down, suggesting maybe I'd absent-mindedly left them on, but I knew I hadn't. Later that same week, I was visiting my gran when my phone rang. It was Olivia, and she was absolutely hysterical. "Matt, you need to come home now," she sobbed. "Something's wrong with the baby monitors." I drove home like a madman. When I got there, Olivia was sitting on the sofa, clutching Lily to her chest. She looked pale as a sheet. She told me that while I was out, both of our baby monitors had started making strange static noises, even though they were digital and shouldn't do that. Then there was an enormous bang on the front door that was so loud it woke Lily up from her nap. Olivia had checked the CCTV from our Ring doorbell, but just like before, there was nothing there. No one had approached our door. That's when things started getting more targeted, especially toward Olivia. She'd be in the bathroom, and there would be knocking on the door, even when I was at work, and she was home alone with Lily. Our baby monitor started showing more and more interference, sometimes going completely black for minutes at a time. The worst night, the one I still have nightmares about, was in August. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up needing the toilet. On my way back to bed, I glanced at the baby monitor screen on Olivia's bedside table. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was this white mist floating across the screen. At first, I thought it was just interference, but then it started to take shape. It formed into what looked like a human silhouette, standing next to Lily's cot. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there watching as this figure seemed to lean over the cot, then back away, then approach again. It did this 3 or 4 times. Finally, I managed to reach out and shake Olivia awake. I couldn't even form words properly. I just pointed at the screen. She saw it too, this misty figure hovering near our daughter. Olivia, being much braver than me, immediately ran to Lily's room. I followed behind, my legs feeling like jelly. When we got there, Lily was sleeping peacefully. There was nothing in the room, no mist, no figure, nothing out of place. But when we looked back at the monitor screen, the figure was still there, gradually fading away until the screen returned to normal. We stayed in Lily's room the rest of the night, taking turns to sleep while the other kept watch. We didn't see the figure again, but neither of us wanted to leave her alone. The next day, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was that figure near my daughter's cot. Olivia suggested we talk to someone, maybe get some advice. I'm not religious, but I was desperate, so I went to see the local vicar. I expected him to think I was mental, but surprisingly, he listened very patiently. When I finished telling him everything, he nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you might be dealing with a poltergeist," he said, matter-of-factly, like he was diagnosing a common cold. He explained that poltergeist activity often centers around young children, feeding off their emotional energy. Or, he suggested, it could be the spirit of the elderly woman who died in our house, perhaps confused or unable to move on. The vicar gave me some suggestions. Nothing dramatic like an exorcism, just simple things like speaking firmly to the presence, telling it to leave us alone, and focusing on creating positive energy in the house. I felt a bit stupid doing it, but that night, Olivia and I went through each room of the house. We opened windows to let the negative energy out, as the vicar had suggested. We spoke out loud, saying things like, "This is our home, and you're not welcome here if you're going to frighten us." I don't know if it was coincidence or if we just talked ourselves into feeling better, but after that night, the activity stopped. The knocking, the bangs on the doors, the interference with the baby monitor, it all just ended. It's been almost a year now, and we haven't experienced anything else unusual. Sometimes I convince myself it was all in our heads. Stress from the pandemic lockdowns, lack of sleep from having a young child, or maybe just an overactive imagination. But then I remember that figure on the baby monitor, leaning over my daughter's cot, and I know what I saw. Olivia saw it too. It wasn't a trick of the light or a camera malfunction. There was something in our house that night. We still live in the same place. We've thought about moving, but the housing market's mad right now, and honestly, whatever it was seems to have gone. Sometimes, though, when I'm home alone, I feel like I'm being watched, and occasionally, out of the corner of my eye, I think I catch a glimpse of something white moving in the hallway. But when I turn to look properly, there's never anything there. I don't talk about this much. People think you're nuts when you start going on about ghosts and poltergeists. Even Olivia and I barely mention it anymore, like we've made some unspoken agreement to pretend it never happened. But it did happen, and to this day, I still can't explain what was in our house last summer or why it suddenly decided to leave us alone. All I know is that I'm keeping those baby monitors on all night, every night. And sometimes, when I check on Lily while she's sleeping, I find myself scanning the corners of her room just to make sure we're truly alone. Story 13. I still can't sleep properly. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and every time I close my eyes, I see those heavy-lidded eyes staring at me through the rearview mirror. I'm writing this partly as therapy, my counselor suggested it, and partly as a warning to anyone who drives alone at night. I needed to visit my sister in Cedar Rapids. It's about a 14-hour drive from where I live in Tennessee. I'm not exactly flush with cash right now, so I decided to do the whole trip in one go to avoid paying for a hotel. It seemed logical at the time. Save $100, push through the night, arrive tired but with my bank account intact. I've done long drives before. I used to drive trucks regionally, so I know how to handle fatigue and stay alert. I prepared like I always do: thermos of coffee, energy drinks, snacks, good playlist, and a fully charged phone. I left my apartment at 7 in the evening, figuring I'd drive through the night when traffic was light and arrive sometime in the late morning. The first few hours were completely normal. The interstate was busy until about 10, then gradually thinned out as I got further from the cities. By midnight, I was deep into rural country, with long stretches of road where I wouldn't see another car for miles. It was peaceful in a way, just me, my music, and the hypnotic white lines of the highway stretching ahead in my headlights. Around 1 in the morning, my fuel gauge started getting low. I hadn't passed a gas station for at least 30 miles, and I was starting to get a bit anxious. My GPS showed a station coming up in about 5 miles, so I decided to stop there, even though I still had about a quarter tank. Better safe than sorry in the middle of nowhere. When I pulled in, I immediately felt uneasy. It was one of those old-school gas stations, just 4 pumps under a small overhead shelter, a darkened convenience store with a closed sign, and a single flickering light illuminating the concrete pad. No other cars, no attendant, just pay-at-the-pump service in the middle of absolute nowhere. I pulled up to the pump closest to the road, got out, and swiped my card. The machine was old and took forever to process my payment. While I was standing there, pumping gas into my car, I heard the sound of an engine approaching slowly from the highway. A dark sedan. I think it was an older model Chevy Impala, but it was hard to tell in the dim light, pulled into the station. The driver didn't pull up to a pump right away. Instead, they cruised slowly around the perimeter of the station, like they were checking the place out. I remember thinking it was odd behavior, but then again, it was the middle of the night in a strange place, so maybe they were just being cautious. After circling once, the car pulled up directly behind mine, blocking me in. My heart immediately started beating faster. There were 3 other empty pumps they could have used, but they chose to box me in. I kept my eyes on my gas pump, trying to will it to fill faster. In my peripheral vision, I saw the driver's door of the other car open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, easily 6'3", wearing a red flannel shirt and black jeans. He just stood there beside his car, staring at me. I risked a glance at him and instantly regretted it. His eyes were wrong, heavy-lidded but intensely focused, like a predator sizing up prey. He wasn't even pretending to be there for gas. He was just watching me with this small smile that never reached those dead eyes. I finished pumping, hung up the nozzle, and got back in my car as quickly as I could without running. My hands were shaking so badly, I had trouble getting the key in the ignition. When I looked in my rearview mirror, he was still just standing there, watching me. I pulled out of the station as calmly as I could manage, heart hammering in my chest. For the next 20 minutes, I kept checking my mirrors, convinced he was following me. But there were no headlights behind me, and eventually, I started to relax a little. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the guy was probably just some local weirdo, and that I needed to focus on my driving. The next few hours were uneventful, but exhausting. By 4 in the morning, I was fighting to keep my eyes open. The coffee had worn off, and the monotony of the empty highway was like a lullaby. I knew I needed to stop and rest, but I was also still spooked by the encounter at the gas station. Eventually, though, practicality won out. My fuel gauge was getting low again, and I knew I couldn't safely drive much further without a break. I pulled into another rural gas station around 4:30. This one was similar to the last. Small, isolated, automated pumps with no attendant. The place was deserted, which should have been a relief, but after my earlier experience, the emptiness felt threatening somehow. I filled up my tank and then pulled into a parking spot at the edge of the lot, away from the pumps but still under the lights. I decided to take a power nap, just 30 minutes to recharge. I locked my doors, reclined my seat slightly, and set an alarm on my phone for 5 a.m. I must have fallen asleep instantly, because the next thing I knew, my phone was buzzing. I groggily reached for it, silencing the alarm. According to my phone, it was 4:55. I'd slept for just 25 minutes, but I felt disoriented, like I'd been out for hours. As I sat up and adjusted my seat, I noticed something in my peripheral vision. There was another car parked about 30 feet away from mine, partially hidden in the shadows at the edge of the lot. My blood went cold when I recognized it, the same dark sedan from the previous gas station. I frantically scanned the area but couldn't see the driver anywhere. Not by the pumps, not in the parking lot, not by The closed convenience store. My hands were shaking as I put my key in the ignition, planning to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. That's when I looked in my rearview mirror. He was in my back seat, crouching down, but visible now that I was looking directly at the mirror. Those same heavy-lidded eyes staring at me with a horrible intensity. The same small smile. I don't remember deciding to move. Pure instinct took over. I yanked the door handle, flung myself out of the car, and ran. I didn't look back, didn't grab my phone or my wallet, just ran as fast as I could toward the tree line about 50 yards from the gas station. I heard my car door slam behind me and the sound of footsteps, but I didn't turn around. I just ran into the woods, pushing through branches and underbrush, ignoring the scratches on my face and arms. The only coherent thought in my head was that I needed to put distance between myself and him. After running for what felt like forever, but was probably only a couple of minutes, I found a large tree and hid behind it, trying to quiet my breathing. I could hear movement in the forest, snapping twigs, rustling leaves, but it was impossible to tell how close he was or which direction he was coming from. I stayed frozen for what must have been 15 minutes, straining to hear any sound of pursuit. Eventually, the woods fell silent except for normal night sounds, insects, the occasional rustling of small animals. Carefully, I peeked around the tree toward the gas station. From my vantage point, I could see part of the lot. My car was still there, but it had been moved, backed up about 20 feet from where I'd parked it. The driver's door was open, interior light shining dimly. Of the man, there was no sign. I was completely stranded. My phone was in my car, and there was no way I was going back for it. The gas station was closed, no houses visible nearby, and I was in the middle of rural nowhere at 5 in the morning. As I was trying to figure out what to do, I noticed something else. The dark sedan was still parked at the edge of the lot. If he was pursuing me in the woods, his car should still have keys in it. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one I had. I circled through the woods, approaching the lot from a different angle, constantly scanning for any sign of the man. When I reached the edge of the tree line, I paused, heart pounding, trying to determine if it was safe to make a run for his car. The lot remained still and silent. My own car's door was still hanging open, interior light still on. I took a deep breath and sprinted across the open space to the sedan. The driver's door was unlocked. I yanked it open, ready to dive in and drive away, and stopped short. The keys were indeed in the ignition, but there was something else on the floor of the passenger side. A phone, not mine, an older flip phone. I grabbed the keys and the phone, started the car, and peeled out of that parking lot like the devil himself was after me. Once I was on the highway, I flipped open the phone, praying it had service. It did, 1 bar, but enough. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The police met me at the next town, about 20 miles up the highway. I was hysterical, trying to explain what had happened between sobs. They took my statement, then told me something that still makes my skin crawl. The sedan I was driving had been reported stolen 3 days earlier. The owner, a woman in her 30s, had disappeared after stopping at a gas station at night. They found her purse and phone in the car, the phone I'd used to call 911. They sent officers to the gas station where I'd left my car, but by the time they arrived, my vehicle was gone. They searched the surrounding woods but found no trace of the man. The detective who interviewed me thought the man had been stalking travelers on that stretch of highway for some time. He theorized that the man had followed me from the first gas station, waited for me to fall asleep at the second, and then hidden in my back seat. His plan was probably to reveal himself once I was driving again, when I'd be unable to escape. They never found my car, They never found him either. The police believe he's still out there, possibly with my ID and all my personal information from the glove compartment. I took a bus the rest of the way to my sister's place and stayed there for 2 weeks. I'm back home now, but I still jump at shadows and check my back seat obsessively before getting in my car. I've installed security cameras at my apartment and changed all my locks. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't looked in my rearview mirror at that exact moment. If I'd just started driving with him hiding behind me. Where was he planning to make me go? What would he have done to me? I don't drive at night anymore. I don't stop at rural gas stations. And I never ever take my eyes off my rearview mirror. Story 14. I still can't believe what happened to me 6 months ago. I've been trying to make sense of it ever since, but I honestly don't know if I ever will. I was driving from São Paulo to Belo Horizonte to visit my family. It's normally about a 6-hour trip, but I had some work meetings in the morning, so I left late and got stuck in that horrible traffic leaving the city. By 8 in the evening, I'd been driving for almost 10 hours with just short breaks for gas and food, and I was completely exhausted. I decided I couldn't make it all the way and needed to find somewhere to stay for the night. I stopped at a gas station to fill up and asked the attendant if there were any hotels nearby. He gave me directions to a place a few kilometers away, down some side road. I followed his directions, turning off the highway onto a narrow road that wound through what looked like a really old town. The streetlights were spaced, far apart, and gave off this dim yellow light that barely illuminated the street. Most of the buildings looked ancient, like colonial-era stuff with peeling paint and wooden shutters. The whole place felt frozen in time. The weird thing was how empty it felt. No people walking around, no cars moving, just a stray dog here and there. I kept checking my phone to make sure I was going the right way, but the GPS signal was weak and kept cutting out. After about 10 minutes of driving through this ghost town, I finally saw the hotel at the end of the road. It was this small 2-story building with a faded sign that I could barely read in the dark. The parking lot was completely empty, which should have been my first warning sign, but I was so tired, I didn't even question it. I parked right in front of the entrance and grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk. The entrance had these old glass doors that made a horrible creaking sound when I pushed them open. The lobby was dimly lit with just a few yellow lamps casting shadows everywhere. There was this musty smell, like old books and dust. I walked up to the reception desk, but no one was there. I stood there for what felt like forever, looking around for a bell to ring or something. The whole place was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of an old clock on the wall. After waiting for about 5 minutes, I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed through the empty lobby. Finally, a door behind the counter opened, and this woman appeared. She looked to be in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. The weird thing was how startled she seemed to see me standing there, like she wasn't expecting any guests at all. "Oh, good evening," she said, smoothing down her blouse. "Sorry to keep you waiting. We don't get many visitors this time of year." She had me fill out a registration card and asked for my ID. Her hands trembled slightly as she made a copy of it. I remember thinking it was strange that she kept glancing at the door behind me as if expecting someone else to walk in. "Will you be staying just for tonight?" she asked, handing me a large, old-fashioned key with a heavy wooden tag attached to it. "Yes, just tonight. I'm heading to Belo Horizonte tomorrow." She nodded and pointed toward a hallway. "Room 23. It's at the very end of the corridor on the right." I thanked her and headed down the hallway. The carpet was worn in the middle, and the wallpaper had this faded floral pattern that had seen better days. Every few meters there was a wall sconce that gave off barely enough light to see where I was going. My room was literally the last one at the end of the corridor. When I unlocked the door, I was hit with that same musty smell, only stronger. The room was basic: a double bed with a dark green bedspread, a small sofa by the window, a dresser with a TV that looked like it was from the 90s, and a bathroom door in the corner. I was too tired to unpack, so I just dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the small sofa. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through some videos, trying to unwind. The Wi-Fi was surprisingly good for such an old place. I must have dozed off while watching something, because the next thing I remember was being jolted awake by loud knocking on my door. I checked my phone. It was 11:12 at night. The knocking came again, 3 sharp raps. I got up, still groggy, and called out, "Who is it?" No answer, just more knocking. I figured it might be the receptionist with extra towels or something, so I walked to the door and opened it. There was absolutely no one there. The hallway was completely empty and silent. I stuck my head out and looked in both directions, but there wasn't a soul in sight. The hallway lights had been dimmed even further, creating these pockets of shadow between each light. I closed the door, making sure to lock it, and put the security chain on. I convinced myself I must have been dreaming, or that maybe it was someone knocking on a neighboring door and the sound carried. I went to the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, and then got into bed proper. Despite being weirded out, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up again to the same knocking, louder this time. My phone showed it was 2:37 in the morning. My heart was already racing when I sat up in bed. The knocking continued, more insistent now. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding shaky even to my own ears. The knocking stopped. I waited a few seconds before getting out of bed. I approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. Again, the hallway was empty. This time, I was certain I wasn't imagining things. I opened the door carefully, still with the security chain on, and peeked out. Just like before, there was no one there. But this time, I noticed something different. One of the hallway lights at the far end was flickering, and I could have sworn I saw a shadow move just beyond it. I closed and locked the door again, then sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was someone messing with me? Was the hotel haunted? I know that sounds ridiculous, but at 2:30 in the morning in a creepy old hotel, your mind goes to strange places. I decided to go to the front desk and ask if there were other guests who might be pranking me, or if the hotel had some kind of history I should know about. I put on my shoes, grabbed my room key and phone, and headed out. The hallway seemed even darker and longer than before. Each step I took made the floorboards creak beneath the carpet. When I reached the lobby, the same woman was sitting behind the desk, reading a book under a small lamp. She didn't look surprised to see me this time, almost as if she'd been expecting me. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, closing her book. "Someone keeps knocking on my door, but when I open it, no one's there," I explained. "Are there other guests on my floor?" She gave me this look that made my stomach drop. "No, sir. You're the only guest staying with us tonight." I felt a chill run down my spine. The only guest? In the entire hotel? She nodded slowly. "It's the slow season. We rarely get anyone passing through on weeknights." I didn't know what to say. If I was the only guest who was knocking on my door. I asked her if maybe it was one of the hotel staff, but she assured me that after 10 p.m., she was the only employee on duty until the morning shift arrived at 6. "Perhaps it's the old pipes in the walls," she suggested, not sounding very convinced herself. This building is over 100 years old. It makes all sorts of noises at night. I wasn't satisfied with her explanation, but I didn't know what else to do. I asked if I could switch rooms, preferably one closer to the lobby. She apologized and said room 23 was the only one prepared for guests that night. The other rooms were being renovated or had issues with the plumbing. I reluctantly headed back to my room, walking quickly through the dim hallway. When I reached my door, I hesitated before putting the key in. What if someone was waiting inside? I took a deep breath and unlocked the door, flipping on the lights immediately. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. I checked the bathroom, looked under the bed, and even in the small closet. There was no one there and nowhere for anyone to hide. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling completely on edge. I decided to stay awake until morning. I turned off the main light but kept the bathroom light on with the door slightly ajar, giving the room a dim glow. I didn't want to be in complete darkness. I sat there in the semi-darkness, just listening. The hotel was eerily quiet except for the occasional creaking of the building. I picked up my phone to distract myself, and that's when it happened. When I turned on my phone screen, the light illuminated enough of the room for me to see someone sitting at the foot of my bed, watching me. It was a man, completely still, just staring at me with these hollow eyes. He was wearing dark clothes and had this expressionless face that I'll never forget. My heart felt like it stopped. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. We just stared at each other in the blue light of my phone screen. Then he lunged toward me. I don't even remember screaming. I just remember jumping off the bed and running for the door. I could hear him right behind me, his footsteps heavy on the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the door unlocked. Just as I yanked it open, I felt his fingers brush against my back. I sprinted down that hallway faster than I've ever run in my life. I didn't look back once. I burst into the lobby, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my ears. "There's someone in my room!" I yelled at the receptionist. "Call the police." She grabbed the phone immediately and dialed, her face pale with shock. As she was talking to the emergency operator, I heard the front doors of the hotel slam open. I turned just in time to see a dark figure run out into the night. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers searched the hotel thoroughly while another took my statement. They found no sign of forced entry into my room and nothing seemed to be stolen. My wallet and laptop were still there, untouched. One of the officers checked the hotel's security system with the receptionist. There were only 2 working cameras, one at the front entrance and one in the lobby. The footage showed a man entering the hotel through a side door around 10:30 p.m., but his face wasn't visible because he kept his head down. The camera in the lobby caught him briefly as he slipped down the hallway toward the guest rooms. But again, his face was obscured. They never found out who he was or how he got into my room. The theory was that while I was at the front desk asking about the knocking, he had slipped into my room and hidden, waiting for me to return. I was too shaken to stay there another minute. I packed my things and left immediately, driving through the night despite my exhaustion. I've never been so terrified in my life. To this day, I still think about what might have happened if I hadn't turned on my phone when I did. What was he planning to do? How long had he been watching me sleep? The police never found him, and I never got any answers. I avoid small towns and old hotels now, and I always check under the bed and in the closets before I sleep anywhere new. Story 15. I still have nightmares about that night in the autumn of 1925. My hands are shaking even now as I type this, but I need to get it out. I've kept it bottled up for too long, and maybe writing it down will help me make sense of what happened though I doubt it. I was 23 that summer, fresh out of university with a degree in natural sciences, but no real prospects. The war had ended years before, but jobs were still scarce, especially for someone like me who preferred animals to people and the countryside to cities. When I saw the advertisement in the county paper for a game warden position at Capsthorne Hall, it seemed perfect. The position offered lodging, meals, and a modest salary, more than enough for a young bachelor with simple needs. Capsthorne Hall was this massive old estate about 20 miles from my parents' home in Yorkshire. It had been in the Capsthorne family for generations, with acres of woodland, fields, and moorland surrounding it. The place had a reputation for being exclusive. The family rarely entertained and kept mostly to themselves. I remember the day I cycled over for the interview. It was sweltering, and by the time I arrived, my collar was soaked through with sweat. The estate itself was intimidating. Iron gates led to a long gravel drive flanked by ancient oaks. The hall was a sprawling, gloomy Victorian mansion with Gothic touches that made it look like something out of a penny dreadful. I was met at the servants' entrance by Mr. Wilkinshaw, the estate manager. He was a tall, thin man with a perpetual frown who looked me up and down like I was something the cat had dragged in. His handshake was surprisingly firm, though, and his eyes were sharp as he led me to his office. "What makes you think you're qualified for this position, Mr. Blackwood?" he asked before I'd even sat down. I explained my background, my degree, my lifelong interest in wildlife, the summers I'd spent helping the gamekeeper on my uncle's much smaller estate. I was honest about my lack of formal experience, but emphasized my willingness to learn and work hard. Wilkinshaw didn't seem impressed. "This isn't just about maintaining pheasant pens and shooting rabbits, young man. Capsthorne has unique requirements. The position requires absolute discretion." I assured him I was discreet. When he pressed further, asking if I was easily frightened or prone to gossip, I wondered what I was getting myself into. Still, I needed the job, so I promised I could keep secrets and handle whatever came my way. "Very well," he said finally. "Lord Capsthorne is currently abroad, but I have the authority to hire staff. You'll start on Monday. Your duties will include maintaining the pheasant pens, setting traps for predators, and patrolling the grounds after dark to deter poachers. The eastern section bordering the moors is particularly prone to trespassers." I moved into the gamekeeper's cottage that weekend. It was small but comfortable, set about a quarter-mile from the main house at the edge of the woods. The previous gamekeeper had left suddenly. Wilkinshaw was vague about why, but he'd left most of his equipment behind, including some well-maintained shotguns and traps. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. I fell into a routine, mornings tending to the pheasants, afternoons checking traps and boundaries, evenings patrolling. I rarely saw anyone from the main house except Wilkinshaw, who checked on me every few days, and occasionally Mrs. Pritchard, the cook, who would bring me leftover pies or stews. It was early October when everything changed. The days were getting shorter, the nights colder. That particular evening, the sky was clear, with a nearly full moon that cast everything in a silvery light. I'd been patrolling the western woods and was heading toward the eastern section that bordered the moors, the area Wilkinshaw had specifically warned about poachers. The eastern woods were different from the rest of the estate. The trees grew closer together, twisted and gnarled in ways that seemed unnatural. Even in daylight, there was something forbidding about them. At night, with shadows stretching across the leaf-strewn ground, it was downright eerie. I had my shotgun over my shoulder and a lantern in my hand, its yellow glow creating a small circle of light around me. The night was unusually quiet. No owls calling, no rustling of small creatures in the underbrush, just the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the occasional creak of branches in the light breeze. I was approaching the edge of the woods where the trees thinned out before giving way to the moors when I first sensed something was wrong. It was just a feeling at first, the hair on the back of my neck standing up, a tightness in my chest. I stopped, holding the lantern higher, straining to see beyond its limited reach. That's when I spotted it, about 50 yards ahead, just at the edge of where the moonlight penetrated the trees. A dark shape crouched low to the ground. My first thought was that it was a poacher, maybe setting snares. I called out, "Hello there, this is private property." The shape didn't move, but I had the distinct impression it had turned its attention toward me. I took a few steps forward, raising my lantern higher. "I'm the gamekeeper. You need to leave now, or I'll have to report you." As I got closer, I realized this was no man. The proportions were all wrong. Its shoulders were too broad, hunched in a way that should have been painful. Its limbs seemed too long, bent at odd angles. And then it moved, a fluid rolling motion that was nothing like human movement. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The creature rose slowly to its full height, and I felt my blood turn to ice. It was tall, 7 feet at least, and covered in what looked like coarse, dark fur. In the moonlight, I could make out its face, if you could call it that. Yellow eyes reflected the distant light of my lantern, set deep in an elongated head. Its mouth was too large, filled with teeth that looked wickedly sharp. For what felt like an eternity, we just stared at each other. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My finger found the trigger of my shotgun, but I didn't raise it. Some instinct told me that would be a fatal mistake. Then the creature made a sound that will haunt me until my dying day. It started as a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from deep within its chest. Gradually, it rose in pitch and volume until it became a piercing wail that echoed through the trees. It wasn't like any animal sound I'd ever heard. It had an almost human quality to it, but distorted, wrong. My nerve broke. I fired a warning shot into the air, the sound exploding in the quiet night. The creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it dropped to all fours in a movement too quick and fluid for its size. For one horrible moment, I thought it was going to charge at me. But it just watched me with those glowing eyes, then turned and loped away into the darkness, moving faster than any human could. I stood rooted to the spot, shaking uncontrollably. When I finally managed to move, I didn't walk, I ran. I ran all the way back to my cottage, stumbling and nearly falling several times. I barricaded the door behind me and sat up all night with the shotgun across my lap, jumping at every sound. When dawn finally came, I was exhausted but determined to talk to Wilkinshaw. I couldn't stay here, not with that thing in the woods. I walked to the main house as soon as it was light, my shotgun still clutched in my hands. Wilkinshaw was in his office, looking as composed as ever. When I burst in and started babbling about what I'd seen, he didn't look surprised. He didn't even look up from his paperwork at first. "Sit down, Mr. Blackwood," he said calmly, "and please lower your voice." I collapsed into the chair opposite his desk, still trembling. "There's something in the woods," I said. "Something not natural." Wilkinshaw sighed and finally looked at me. "Yes, I know." His response stunned me into silence. He continued, "I've seen it myself, as has every gamekeeper before you. It's been here longer than the hall, longer than any of us." "What is it?" I managed to ask. "Lord Capesthorne calls it his pet, though that's hardly accurate. Wilkinshaw's face was unreadable. Its kind has inhabited this land for centuries. There are records in the family archives dating back to the 1600s. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And you just let it roam around? It could kill someone. It hasn't yet, he replied coolly. And it won't, so long as we respect its territory. It stays in the eastern woods and the moors beyond. We stay out of its way after dark. It's a simple arrangement that has worked for generations. But what if someone else sees it? A visitor or... That's why discretion is so important in this position, Mr. Blackwood. As I emphasized during your interview, his eyes hardened. The creature is part of Capsthorne. Harming it, or even spreading tales about it, would bring untold woe to this house and its owners. Lord Capsthorne is very clear on this matter. I left Wilkinshaw's office in a daze. I considered leaving, packing my things and walking away from Capsthorne Hall forever. But where would I go? Jobs were scarce, and I had no savings to speak of. My parents couldn't support me, and I'd be laughed out of any respectable position if I started talking about monsters in the woods. So I stayed. I continued my duties, but I made changes. I carried extra ammunition. I bought a brighter lantern. And I said a silent prayer whenever I had to patrol anywhere near the eastern woods after dark. I never saw the creature as clearly as I did that night, but I caught glimpses sometimes. A shadow moving too quickly between trees, the flash of yellow eyes in the darkness, the sound of that terrible howl echoing across the moors on particularly dark nights. What troubles me most, even now, isn't just the memory of that creature. It's the casual way Wilkinshaw acknowledged its existence, as if sharing your estate with a monster was the most natural thing in the world. It's the thought that there are places in this world, even in our modern times, where the old wild things still rule. And it's the knowledge that somewhere in rural England, on a grand old estate, where time seems to stand still, something is waiting in the woods, watching, howling, hungry. Story 16. I'm still shaking as I type this. It's been 3 days since it happened, and I can't get the images out of my head. I keep replaying everything, wondering what would have happened if Bean hadn't been with us. So my friends and I had been planning this spring break trip for months. Nothing crazy, just the 4 of us getting away from campus and the insane parties. Lucas, Jackson, Ariel, and me, Isabel. We're all juniors at University of Alabama, and honestly, after midterms kicked our asses, we just wanted somewhere quiet to decompress. Lucas suggested this secluded beach spot about 2 hours from campus. His family used to go there when he was younger, before it got kind of forgotten when fancier beaches started developing nearby. It's this stretch of public beach that hardly anyone visits anymore, especially this early in the season when the water's still pretty cold. We left campus around 4 in the afternoon last Friday. It took longer than expected because we had to stop for supplies, and then Jackson insisted we get proper food instead of just bringing ramen and chips. By the time we finally got to the beach access road, the sun was already starting to set. The road was basically just packed sand with some gravel, winding between these tall dunes. Lucas's Jeep handled it fine, but it felt isolated immediately. There were absolutely no other cars in the small clearing that served as a makeshift parking lot. Just woods on one side and dunes leading to the beach on the other. "Are we sure this is legal?" Ariel asked as we started unloading. She's always been the cautious one. "It's public land," Lucas assured her while letting Bean, his Doberman, out of the back seat. Bean immediately took off running circles around us, obviously happy to be free after the long drive. "We can camp anywhere as long as we're not blocking access and clean up after ourselves." The beach was beautiful in that wild, untouched way. No boardwalks, no snack stands, no lifeguard towers. Just sand, sea oats swaying on the dunes, and the sound of waves. The sunset was painting everything this deep orange pink, and for a minute, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. We hustled to set up camp before it got completely dark. Jackson and Lucas put up the 2 tents while Ariel and I gathered driftwood for a small fire. Bean kept running back and forth from the water's edge, wet and sandy and absolutely loving life. That's when Ariel nudged me and nodded toward the access road. "That car just drove by again," she said quietly. I hadn't noticed it the first time, but now I saw this old, beat-up SUV crawling along the access road that ran parallel to the dunes, maybe 100 yards from our camp. It was going unusually slow, like whoever was driving was watching us. "Probably just locals checking out who's here," I said, trying to sound unconcerned, but something about it made me uneasy. About 15 minutes later, while we were still setting up, the same vehicle passed by again, even slower this time. I could see the driver's silhouette clearly against the darkening sky. Just one person. "That's the 3rd time that car's gone by," Ariel said to Lucas as he finished hammering in the last tent stake. Lucas straightened up and looked toward the road. The SUV had stopped this time, just sitting there with its headlights illuminating the empty stretch of sand ahead. "Probably just curious," Jackson said, but I noticed he was watching the vehicle carefully too. That's when the driver's door opened. Even from this distance, I could tell it was a man, tall and thin, with movements that seemed jerky, uncoordinated. He started walking toward us, and I immediately noticed his strange, uneven gait. He limped heavily, dragging his right leg slightly. Bean noticed him too. The dog had been happily digging in the sand, but now he went completely still, his body rigid, eyes locked on the approaching stranger. A low growl started in his throat. "Hey," Lucas said quietly, motioning to Jackson. "Let's go see what he wants." I'll never forget the feeling of dread that washed over me as the guys walked out to intercept him. Ariel and I stayed by the tents, but we moved closer together. I remember gripping the tent pole so hard my fingers hurt. As the man got closer, details became clearer in the fading light. He looked to be in his 40s maybe, with this gaunt face and patchy beard. His clothes were dirty and hung off his frame like they belonged to someone bigger. What struck me most was his eyes. They seemed unfocused, darting around. "Evening," Lucas called out, keeping his voice friendly but firm. "Can we help you? With something?" The man stopped about 10 feet from them, swaying slightly. "You're on my property," he slurred, his words running together. Even from where I stood, I could smell the alcohol on him. "Sir, this is public beach," Jackson explained calmly. "We checked before coming out here." The man's face twisted. "Don't tell me what's what, boy. This is my land, my grandfather's land. You need to pack up and get." Bean had moved to stand between Lucas and the stranger, still growling softly. The man glanced at the dog, then back at Lucas. "Call off your mutt," he demanded. "He's fine as long as you are," Lucas responded, his hand resting on Bean's head. I don't know what changed in that moment. Maybe it was Lucas not immediately giving in, or maybe the man had planned this all along. But suddenly, without any warning, the stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, not a pocket knife, but this hunting knife with a blade that caught the last light of dusk. "I said, get off my land," he shouted, taking a step forward. Everything happened so fast after that. Bean lunged forward with a snarl that still echoes in my nightmares. He went straight for the man's arm, teeth clamping down on his wrist. The knife fell to the sand as the man screamed, this horrible, pained sound that didn't even sound human. Bean held on for just a second before Lucas called him off. The man stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding arm, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You're dead," he spat, backing away. "All of you. That dog too." He turned and half ran, half limped back to his SUV. The engine roared to life, tires spinning in the sand as he reversed, then sped away down the access road. We stood frozen for what felt like forever. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Jackson was the first to move, walking over to where the knife had fallen and carefully picking it up with the edge of his shirt. "We need to call the police," Ariel said, her voice shaking. She already had her phone out, but was staring at the screen with frustration. "I have barely any signal." "Let's pack up," Lucas decided, kneeling to praise Bean, who was still on high alert, scanning the dunes. "We'll drive to where we have better reception. I don't want to be here if he comes back with something worse than a knife." None of us argued. The peaceful beach suddenly felt exposed and threatening. Every shadow among the sea oats looked like someone waiting to attack. Every sound of the waves could be masking the approach of the SUV returning. We packed up in record time, barely talking except to coordinate who was grabbing what. Lucas kept Bean off-leash, letting him patrol around us as we worked. Every few minutes the dog would stop and stare intently toward the road or the dunes, making my heart jump into my throat. "What if he's still out there?" I whispered to Ariel as we stuffed sleeping bags into their sacks. "That's why we're leaving," she whispered back, but I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. We'd have to walk back to the parking lot along that same access road. Once everything was packed, we huddled together for a moment, planning our exit. "I'll lead with Bean," Lucas said. "Jackson, you bring up the rear, girls in the middle. We stay together, move quickly, and don't stop for anything." Walking back to the parking lot was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The moon had risen, casting everything in this eerie blue-white light that created more shadows than it illuminated. Bean kept pace with Lucas, occasionally freezing and staring into the darkness between the dunes. Each time he did, we all stopped too, barely breathing, straining to hear anything beyond the surf and wind. We finally reached the small clearing where we'd parked. A wave of relief washed over me when I saw Lucas's Jeep still sitting there. At least the man hadn't vandalized our only way out. But that relief was short-lived. As we approached the vehicle, Bean suddenly darted ahead, growling again. In the same moment, headlights appeared at the entrance to the parking area. A police cruiser pulled in, its lights casting harsh beams across the sand. An officer stepped out, hand resting on his holster, until he spotted us clearly. "You folks call about an incident on the beach?" he called out. "Yes, officer," Jackson answered, stepping forward with the knife still wrapped in his shirt. "A man threatened us with this." The officer approached cautiously, taking the knife and examining it through the fabric. He was middle-aged with a weathered face and the careful movements of someone who'd seen too many situations go bad. "You all okay? Anyone hurt?" he asked, looking us over. "We're fine," Lucas said. "Thanks to my dog." As Lucas explained what happened, I walked to the Jeep, just wanting to get our stuff loaded so we could leave. That's when I noticed. "Lucas," I called, my voice cracking. "The tires." All 4 tires had been slashed, not just punctured, but viciously cut open, the rubber gaping like wounds. The officer came over immediately, shining his flashlight on the damage. "He must have done this while you were packing up on the beach," he said grimly. "You get a good look at this guy? Or his vehicle?" We described both as best we could. The officer nodded, writing in his notepad. Sounds like Roy Mercer. He's got priors for trespassing, public intoxication, threatening behavior. Lives in a trailer about 5 miles from here. Claims his family used to own all this land before the state took it for public use back in the 70s. Will you arrest him? Ariel asked. The officer sighed. I'll certainly pay him a visit tonight. With the knife and the tire damage, we've got enough to bring him in. But folks like Roy, they don't stay locked up long. He helped us call a tow truck, then took our formal statements while we waited. Bean stayed vigilant the entire time, occasionally staring into the darkness, beyond the parking lot with such intensity that it made me wonder if Roy was out there watching us. It was nearly 3 in the morning by the time we got back to campus. None of us talked much during the ride in the tow truck or the Uber we had to take from the service station. What was there to say? We'd gone looking for peace and instead found a nightmare. The officer called Lucas yesterday to say they'd arrested Roy. Found him at his trailer with the bite wound on his arm and blood on his clothes. He denied everything, of course, but they're holding him for now. It should make me feel better, but it doesn't. I keep thinking about how different things could have ended. If Bean hadn't been there, if Lucas and Jackson hadn't walked out to intercept him, if Roy had brought a gun instead of a knife. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that knife catching the last light of day. I hear Roy's voice promising we're all dead. I wonder if he meant it, if when they release him, he'll come looking for us. Beach season is starting soon. People will be heading to all the popular spots for sun and fun, but not me. I don't think I'll ever feel safe on a beach again, not even in broad daylight with crowds around, because now I know what can be hiding just beyond the dunes, watching and waiting. Story 17. I still get chills when I think about how close I came to meeting a complete stranger in that park. It's been 6 months now, but I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something terrible. I moved to Los Angeles last fall to start law school at UCLA. I was excited but overwhelmed. New city, intense program, and barely knowing anyone. My apartment was small but decent, close enough to campus that I could walk most days. The first few weeks were a blur of orientation, case readings, and trying to memorize faces and names of classmates who all seemed to already know each other. One evening in late September, I was up late reviewing contracts cases when my phone pinged with a Facebook notification. A friend request from someone named Maddie Reynolds. The profile picture showed a young woman with dark hair similar to mine, smiling on a beach. I didn't recognize her immediately, but then I saw her location, Los Angeles. My heart actually skipped. Madeline, my half-sister, some family background. My dad had a brief relationship before meeting my mom, and Madeline was born from that relationship. I'd never met her, but I knew she existed and that she lived somewhere in LA. Our families had tension. Her mom apparently resented my dad for moving on, and my mom wasn't exactly thrilled about maintaining connections with my dad's past. So we grew up completely separate, with only the occasional mention of her existence during family arguments. I'd actually thought about trying to find her when I moved to LA, but I wasn't sure how to go about it, or if she'd even want to meet me. And now here she was, finding me instead. I accepted the request immediately and sent a message. Maddie, I'm guessing you're my half-sister? I just moved to LA for law school. She replied within minutes. OMG, Anna. Yes, it's me. I saw you pop up in my suggested friends and I couldn't believe it. You're in LA now? That's amazing. We messaged back and forth for about an hour. She told me she was studying at a community college, working part-time at a boutique in West Hollywood. She asked about law school, about my apartment, about whether I was enjoying LA. The conversation felt natural, if a bit surreal. Here I was, talking to this person who shared my blood, but who I'd never known. After we'd been chatting for a while, she suggested we meet up. I'm having a small dinner thing with some friends this Saturday at Franklin Park. Nothing fancy, just a little picnic setup. Would be a perfect chance to finally meet. Around 7? I looked up Franklin Park quickly and saw it. It was somewhere in East LA. I hesitated. Part of me was thrilled at the chance to meet her, but something felt off about meeting for the first time in a park with a bunch of other people around. That sounds fun, but maybe we could meet for coffee first, just the two of us. It might be nice to talk privately before meeting all your friends. Her response came quickly. Oh, it's really just a couple people, super casual. The park is really pretty at sunset. Trust me, it'll be perfect. I still felt uncomfortable. I was new to LA and didn't know the neighborhoods well. Plus, meeting my half-sister for the first time felt like it should be more intimate than a picnic with strangers. I'm sorry. I think I'd really prefer something one-on-one for our first meeting. Maybe next week instead. I could meet you for lunch or coffee. She seemed disappointed but said she understood. She suggested we'd plan something else soon, and the conversation tapered off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Maddie, wondering if I'd made the right call. Was I being paranoid? Maybe I'd missed out on a perfect opportunity to meet her in a casual setting. But something about it just didn't sit right with me. The next day I was swamped with classes and assignments, and the whole thing slipped to the back of my mind. Over the next couple weeks I messaged Maddie a few times, but her responses became increasingly brief and sporadic. Eventually, she stopped responding altogether. I figured she was busy, or maybe she'd lost interest in connecting with me after I'd declined her invitation. About 3 weeks after our initial conversation, I was working on a legal research assignment that had me digging through crime statistics for different LA neighborhoods. I was looking up data for various areas when I remembered Franklin Park. Out of curiosity, I typed it into Google. What I found made my blood run cold. Franklin Park was in one of the most dangerous parts of East LA. It was known for gang activity, drug deals, and had one of the highest rates of violent crime in the city. There had been 2 shootings there in the past month alone. Several articles specifically advised against visiting the park after dark, even in groups. My hands were shaking as I closed my laptop. Why would my half-sister invite me, someone she'd never met, to meet her in such a dangerous place after dark? It didn't make sense. Something compelled me to look at her Facebook profile again. When I searched for Maddie Reynolds, nothing came up. The profile was gone. I checked my friend list, my messages. Everything had disappeared. It was as if she'd never existed. I tried to tell myself there could be an explanation. Maybe she'd decided to delete Facebook. Maybe she'd had second thoughts about connecting with me. But combined with the park location, a sick feeling was growing in my stomach. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who had I really been talking to? Was it some kind of scam or something worse? I decided I needed to know for sure. I remembered that my dad had once mentioned Madeline was studying at Cal State LA. It wasn't much to go on, but it was something. After some hesitation, I called my dad and awkwardly asked if he knew anything else about her. He seemed surprised, but told me she was studying psychology and had a friend named Jenna, who she'd been close with since high school. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to find a Jenna Martinez on the Cal State LA student directory who was also studying psychology. I took a chance and sent her an email explaining who I was and asking if she knew Madeline. To my surprise, Jenna responded that same day. She confirmed she was friends with Madeline Reynolds and seemed excited about the possibility of us connecting. She offered to ask Madeline if she'd be interested in meeting me. 2 days later, I received an email from Jenna with Madeline's real email address. Madeline had apparently been just as shocked to hear about me as I was to find her. We exchanged a few emails, both cautious but curious. After verifying some family details that a stranger wouldn't know, we agreed to meet at Jenna's apartment that weekend. I was a nervous wreck the day of the meeting. What if she didn't like me? What if it was awkward? What if this was somehow another trap? I almost canceled twice, but I went. Jenna's apartment was in a nice area near campus, with security at the entrance. When I knocked on the door, it was opened by a young woman with eyes that looked startlingly like mine. "Anna?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. "Madeline?" I replied. We just stood there staring at each other for a moment, and then suddenly we were hugging and crying. It was the strangest feeling, like meeting a stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger at all. Jenna tactfully left us alone, and we spent hours talking. We had the same laugh, the same way of tucking hair behind our ears when we were thinking. She showed me pictures of her mom, told me about her childhood. I did the same. There were awkward moments and painful ones too, talking about our shared father and the circumstances that had kept us apart. Then I mentioned Facebook. "I almost can't believe we're finally meeting. When you sent me that friend request last month, I was so nervous." Madeline interrupted me, looking confused. "What friend request?" My stomach dropped. "On Facebook? A few weeks ago?" She shook her head slowly. "Anna, I haven't used Facebook since high school. I deleted my account years ago." I told her everything, about the messages, the invitation to Franklin Park, how the profile had disappeared. As I spoke, Madeline's face grew increasingly pale. "This isn't the first time this has happened," she said quietly. "Last year, someone pretended to be me and scammed one of my friends out of money. We never found out who it was. But this felt different. This wasn't about money. Someone had found out I was new to LA, discovered I had a half-sister I'd never met, and created an elaborate scheme to get me to a dangerous location after dark. Why would someone do that? I whispered, more to myself than to her. Madeline reached out and squeezed my hand. I don't know, but I'm really glad you didn't go to that park. We reported it to Facebook and the police, but nothing came of it. The account was gone, the IP address untraceable. The police officer suggested it might have been an attempted robbery, or worse. He said I was lucky I'd trusted my instincts. That night, after meeting my real sister, a meeting that was beautiful and healing and everything I could have hoped for, I lay awake in my apartment with all the lights on. I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if I'd gone to that park. Who might have been waiting for me there? What had they planned to do? I never found out who was behind that fake profile or what they wanted from me. Sometimes I still check my Facebook requests twice, 3 times before accepting. I've thought about deleting my social media altogether. Madeline and I are close now. We meet for coffee every Sunday, and she's introduced me to her friends, her boyfriend, even her mom. But sometimes when we're together, I catch her looking at me with this expression, part wonder, part relief, and I know she's thinking the same thing I am. If I hadn't trusted my gut that night, we might never have had the chance to know each other at all. Story 18. I've always wondered about my mom's past. There's something in her eyes when I ask about growing up in Mexico, this momentary shadow that crosses her face before she laughs it off or changes the subject. She left her hometown on the northern border with Texas when she was 23, came to the US alone for her doctorate, met my dad, and never looked back. At least that's the official version. Most families have stories they share, over and over at gatherings, childhood adventures, embarrassing moments, family traditions. But with my mom, there's this wall of silence about anything before she came to America. It's like her life started the day she crossed the border. The few details I've managed to piece together over the years don't add up to much. I know her father worked for the government somehow, though she's vague about what exactly he did. She never mentions her mother at all. Once, when I pressed her about her family, she made this joke that didn't sound like a joke. On my father's side, they were politicians. On my mother's side, they were crooks. And honestly, I couldn't tell you which was which. Then she smiled that smile that always means the conversation is over. There was one other thing. When I was maybe 11 or 12, I woke up late one night and heard my mom on the phone in the kitchen. She was speaking rapid Spanish, which wasn't unusual, but her voice was different, lower, more authoritative. I remember freezing in the hallway when I heard her say a name, just an initial, really, R. Something about the way she said it made me stay hidden. R necesita entender que esto no es negociable, she said. R needs to understand this isn't negotiable. When she saw me a moment later, she hung up immediately and acted like nothing happened. I didn't think much about any of this until what happened 3 days ago. I'm still trying to process it, trying to make sense of what it means about who my mother really is. I was driving through Arizona to visit my college buddy Jake in Phoenix. It was around 4 in the afternoon, that golden hour when the desert looks like it's on fire. The highway stretched empty ahead of me, with those stunning red rock formations in the distance. I'd been driving for hours and was getting a bit zoned out, so I called my mom to stay awake. We were just chatting about normal stuff, my job, her garden, my sister's new baby, when I noticed something weird up ahead. 2 pickup trucks were parked across the road, blocking both lanes completely. They weren't police vehicles or anything official, just beat-up trucks with no markings. "Mom, hang on," I said, slowing down. "There's something going on up here." As I got closer, 3 men got out of the trucks. They were wearing jeans and work shirts, nothing unusual except for the bandanas covering the lower half of their faces. And the guns. They all had handguns, and one had what looked like a shotgun. My heart started pounding so hard I could barely hear my mom asking what was happening. I put the phone down on the passenger seat without ending the call. Everything in me was screaming to turn around, but there was nowhere to go. Just desert on both sides of the road, and they'd definitely catch me if I tried to off-road it in my Honda Civic. I stopped about 30 feet from their makeshift roadblock. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then one of them, tall guy with a red bandana, gestured with his gun for me to get out. When I stepped out of the car, my legs were shaking so badly I had to lean against the door. The desert heat hit me immediately, but I was cold with fear. "Wallet, phone, keys," the tall one said in accented English. His eyes were dark and emotionless above the bandana. The other 2 spread out, one moving to the back of my car, the other coming around to the passenger side. I reached slowly into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. "Look, I don't have much cash," I said, hating how my voice trembled. "Everything," he repeated, gesturing with the gun again. I handed over my wallet, then remembered my phone was still in the car with my mom on the line. The second guy was already opening the passenger door. He picked up the phone, looked at it, and said something in Spanish to the others. "Who you talking to?" the tall one asked me. "My mother," I said. "Please, she'll be worried." He laughed, not a nice sound. "Your mama can't help you here." The guy with my phone looked at the screen, then put it to his ear. "Hola? ¿Quién es?" He listened for a moment, then his eyebrows shot up. He said something else in Spanish, too fast for me to catch with my high school Spanish. I watched as he walked a few steps away, still talking on my phone. His body language changed. He straightened up, turned half away from the others. The conversation went on for maybe 2 minutes, though it felt much longer. The other 2 guys kept watching me, but I could tell they were also listening to what was happening. When the guy finally ended the call, he came back slowly. He said something to the others in a low voice. The tall one's eyes widened slightly above his bandana. He looked at me differently now, like he was reassessing something. There was a rapid exchange in Spanish between them. I caught a few words, madre, familia, and that initial again, R. The tall one shook his head like he couldn't believe something, then turned back to me. "What's your mother's name?" he asked abruptly. I told him, confused by the change in his tone. He nodded, then to my complete shock, handed my wallet back to me. "You can go," he said. "We take only cash as tax, for safe passage." I stood there stunned as the guy with my phone walked over and handed it back too, along with my keys. They'd taken the $200 I had in my wallet, but were letting me go with everything else: credit cards, ID, car, my life. "Go now," the tall one said, already turning away. "Don't stop until Phoenix." I got back in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The men moved their trucks just enough to let me pass. As I drove through the gap, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw them watching me go, then climbing back into their vehicles. When I was about a mile down the road, I pulled over, heart still racing. I called my mom back immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked before I could say anything. Her voice was calm, too calm for someone whose son had just been held at gunpoint. "Mom, what the hell just happened?" I demanded. "What did you say to them?" "I told them I was going to call the police," she said. "That's bullshit," I said, the adrenaline making me bold. "They weren't afraid of the police. They gave everything back after talking to you. They knew your name." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "Miguel, listen to me. Sometimes it's better not to ask questions. I'm just glad you're safe." "Mom, I have to go," she said. "Call me when you get to Jake's." She hung up, and I sat there in the desert silence, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Those men hadn't let me go because my mom threatened to call the police. They'd let me go because of who she was, or who she knew. I drove the rest of the way to Phoenix in a daze, jumping at every car that appeared behind me. Jake knew something was wrong the minute he saw me, and after a couple of beers, I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then let out a low whistle. "Dude, your mom's in a cartel," he said. "That's ridiculous," I replied automatically, but the pieces were starting to fit together in my mind. Her refusal to talk about her past, the mysterious phone calls in Spanish, the way she tenses up whenever news about Mexican drug cartels comes on TV, that joke about politicians and crooks in her family. "Think about it," Jake said. "You're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by armed men, and one phone call from your mom makes them back off completely? That's not normal mom power, man." I've been staying at Jake's place for the last few days, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wants to confront her directly when I get back home, demand the truth about who she really is, who R is, and what connections she still has in Mexico. But another part of me is afraid of what I might learn and what it might mean for our relationship if I push too hard. What if Jake is right? What if my mother, who makes the best tamales in the neighborhood and cries at sad movies and sends me stupid cat memes, has some connection to the cartels? What if her father wasn't just a government worker but something more complicated? What if her mother's side really were crooks? And if that's true, what does it make me? What blood runs in my veins? I'm driving back home tomorrow. I still don't know what I'm going to say to her, or if I'll say anything at all. Maybe it's better not to know some things. Maybe some secrets should stay buried in the desert. But I keep thinking about those men and how quickly they changed when they heard her voice, how they knew her name. I keep hearing that name, R, spoken in the desert heat by men with guns who suddenly treated me with respect bordering on fear. Who is my mother, really? And do I really want to find out?